The Roman root of Greece. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, The Beginning of Difficulty. In 1882, the Tatoi Manor of the Athens royal family, located on the hillside in the north of Athens, covers an area of 4,500 hectares. The manor has lush forests and green grass. The quiet Tatoi Palace is the palace of the Greek royal family. In midsummer, the king's family will come here to cool off sitting on a wooden chair in the garden of the Tatoi Palace. Wang Lin took a nap, thinking about the experiences of these years in his mind, giving people the absurd feeling of the Arabian Nights. Wang Lin was originally a tourist who visited Athens, the capital of Greece, in the 21st century. When he was tired, he rested against a tree at the Tatoi Palace, the former site of the kingdom of Sheila. When he woke up, he found that he had turned into a baby. In the days that followed, Wang Lin gradually understood his situation, and he passed through. He is now the son of King George I of Greece. George I was the first monarch of the Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glucksburg dynasty of Greece. After the dethronement of King Otto I of Greece in 1862, the British elected the then 18-year-old monarch. Prince George of Denmark came to Greece to be king. The ancestors of George I's mother were Anna of Bohemia and Hungary, wife of the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand I, who was a descendant of the Byzantine, later nickname for Eastern Rome, Empire of the Comnenian dynasty through his father's ancestor, Amadeo VI, Count of Savoy. He was a descendant of the Byzantine Empire of the Paleologian dynasty. Her mother was Grand Duchess Olga Constantinovna of Russia, and Olga Constantinovna's grandfather was Tsar Nicholas I of Russia. In the blink of an eye, Constantine had lived in Athens for 15 years, and was already accustomed to the life here, but whenever he thought of his past experiences, he could not help but sigh at the unpredictable nature of the world. The reason why Constantine was named was at the request of the Greek people. In 1571, the last princess of the Eastern Roman Empire, Sophia Paleologe, the niece of the last emperor of Eastern Rome, Constantine I, married the Grand Duke Ivan I of Russia. Since then, the Russian royal family has owned the Roman royal family bloodline, claiming to be the successor of the Roman Empire and calling itself the Third Roman Empire. George I succeeded to the throne, which means that Constantine had the blood of the Roman royal family, and his body was flowing with the blood of the Roman emperor. The Greeks hoped that one day, the crown prince named Constantine, the king with the blood of the Roman emperor flowing in his body, can once again rule the great city with the same name as him, Constantinople, and the city is now the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Her name is now Istanbul, the largest city in the later Republic of Turkey. Being a monarch in Europe is not as easy and comfortable as people think, especially the monarchs of small and weak countries, who often suffer from splitting. In 1830, the Greek people persevered and fought bravely and fearlessly, and finally gained independence from Ottoman Turkey, which is known as the national prison when it comes to Greece. People's first impression is an ancient civilization with a long history, the birthplace of Western civilization, and the birthplace of democracy. The birth gave birth to philosophers, famous scholars. Aristotle, Socrates, developed commerce, and engaged in democracy. The city-state of Athens, Sparta, which is endowed with a strong martial spirit, and so on. However, for the Greeks of the 19th century, these things were already a very distant history. In 1881, at the strong request of the Greek people, the Berlin Conference organized by Bismarck agreed to cede Thessaly of Ottoman Turkey to the Kingdom of Greece. Greece in 1882 was a downright impoverished small country in Europe, located in the southern corner of the Balkan Peninsula, and it was inconspicuous if one did not consider history. However, the Greeks have a great ideal, which is to restore the former glory. The Greek region has been under the rule of Rome since it was conquered by the ancient Roman Empire until the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, which lasted until the Ottoman Turkish Empire destroyed the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire. In 1453, Eastern Rome was heavily Hellenized in the middle and late stages, and Greek became the official language of the empire. Orthodox preaching used Greek, and the title of the emperor was no longer the Roman-style Augustus or Caesar, but the Greek Basileus, Greek title for the king as a remnant of the Roman Empire. The Greeks were ruled by the Ottoman Empire for 300 years and finally became independent naturally. The Greeks, with thousands of years of history, splendid civilization and long culture, have a strong desire to restore the past glory. The specific performance is to recover the territory, to recover those places where the Greeks are the majority and are still ruled by the Ottoman Empire. To recover the place still inhabited by the Greeks under foreign rule is to restore Greece to the territory of the Eastern Roman, Byzantine Empire. This matter has become the public issue that the Greek people are most concerned about. The Greek nationalists of 1878, who proposed the land and population to realize the great ideals, they included, first, the European part of Ottoman Turkey, Thrace, has 729,000 residents. Second, Macedonia has 588,000 Greeks. Third, Epirus, with 618,000 Greeks. Fourth, Thessaly, 248,000 Greeks. Fifth, the islands in the Aegean Sea and the eastern Mediterranean Sea where Greeks live, such as Crete, Kos, Cyprus, Mytilene, etc. add up to a total of 722,000 people. Sixth, the Asian territories of Ottoman Turkey, Asia Minor has 1.188 million Greeks. Syria and Palestine have 150,000 Greeks. All of these add up to a total of 432.5 Greek knights. This is almost all the core territory of Ottoman Turkey. Thinking of this, Constantine couldn't help shaking his head and smiling bitterly. He put his hand on his forehead and tried to control his emotions. This ideal is so lofty and great. You reading www.uucan'tchoo.com. Inspired by this ideal, the hearts of the Greeks are floating, restless, and hardly venting their national feelings. However, as far as the gap between reality and ideal is, the suffering of the Greeks is so profound. As of 1882, the Kingdom of Greece included Thessaly, which had just been recovered, and there were only about 800,000 Greeks living on the territory. The Greek peninsula is mostly mountainous, 80% of the territory is mountainous and hilly, and only about 16% of the land is suitable for cultivation. The land is barren and the harvest of food crops is not high. Since independence, they have not even been able to provide food themselves, and they have to import food on a large scale every year in order to survive. The ancient Greeks were forced to vigorously develop overseas trade. Because their land was not fertile, they could only plant a large number of grapes and turn them into wine. The wine and other handicrafts were exchanged for food in other regions rich in food, such as Egypt. It can be said that since ancient times, the land of Greece has been notoriously barren. Originally, the population of the Kingdom of Greece was sparse. To make matters worse, this land was not suitable for cultivation, and it had a great ideal. It's really hard if you are a small country and develop with peace of mind. Greece may not have the chance to realize its ideals. This is an opportunity given by the background of the times, that is, the decline of the Ottoman Empire at the end of the 19th century. Ottoman Turkey was known as the sick man of West Asia, and the Manchu and Qing dynasties in the East reflected each other. It's just that the fever of fanatical nationalism persists, and in the hearts of the Greeks, it scratches and scratches the hearts of the Greeks like cat's claws. Constantine took a deep breath, wanting to sit firmly on the throne of Greece and develop Greece. This difficulty is really the beginning of hell. Chapter 2. One man named Stanley. Your Highness, His Majesty King George and Queen Olga are already waiting for you in the dining room, and breakfast is ready. A sudden voice from beside him interrupted Constantine, who was thinking. Looking up, it turned out that it was his personal maid who came to tell him to have dinner. Nina is 2 years older than herself. She entered the Greek royal court since she was a child, and has been dispatched to Constantine's side to serve and take care of Constantine's clothing, food and daily life. Although she is only 2 years older than Constantine, but she is smart and sensible, and won the favor of Queen Olga according to the Queen's wishes. Sending Nina to Constantine's side was not just as simple as giving Constantine a servant. Although the royal family has a noble status and a bright appearance, there are only gains and losses. It is precisely because of the high status that everyone is the focus of attention wherever they go. No matter when and where, they must not lose the royal majesty and dignity, and there are rules in the court. Too many, and after a long time, it is easy to make people feel boring. Therefore, Queen Olga sent Nina to Constantine's side, hoping that Constantine could have appear as a playmate and dilute the boring life of the court. I saw Nina with her hands behind her back, her body leaning forward, her face facing Constantine, her tongue sticking out of her mouth. She was wearing a black maid uniform, a white apron in front of her, and a white sanitary cap on her head. At the age of 17, she was the most beautiful girl in appearance. She was slim, petite, and fair-faced. The brown eyes are clear and bright, the nose is small and firm, and the chest rises and falls on a small scale. Dressed in an ordinary maid's attire, she looks eye-catching when she wears it. Nina, be careful that Queen Olga sees your naughty appearance and will transfer you away. Constantine stood up from the chair while teasing with Nina, and walked with Nina in the direction of the restaurant. You'd better worry about yourself. Even in the royal family, I have rarely heard of someone as expensive as you. He stared at Constantine with a worried look on his face. The thing you planned cost so high, can it really be successful? Nina was Constantine's personal servant and the person Constantine trusted most. The two grew up together and knew each other well. No matter what they did, Constantine would not hide it from her. She knew almost everything about Constantine. It's up to people to get things done. As for whether it's successful or not, then only God knows. Do your best and obey the destiny. Constantine said lightly, but there was a look of determination in his eyes. Although the Greek royal family was born in the Danish royal family, Denmark is a country with a majority of Protestants. The royal family is Protestant. Constantine was named Duke of Sparta at birth, the heir to the Greek throne, accepted the baptism of the Orthodox Church, and is an Orthodox Church believer. This is because Greece is a country where the Orthodox Church is the state religion. In order to win the favor of the people, the future king of Greece should be united with the people and have the same belief. The queen ordered me to summon you. From the look on her face, I'm afraid she is going to ask about it. You have to be prepared. Nina was still a little worried that Constantine would make Queen Olga lose her temper. Don't worry, Nina, I'm ready. Constantine patted Nina's back with his right hand to comfort him while they were talking. The two were already approaching the dining room. Nina took 2 steps slowly to make herself one position behind Constantine. The relaxed expression on her face also turned into a serious and solemn expression. Constantine, who was beside him, saw this scene and wanted to laugh, but Nina patted his arm as punishment. The two walked to European-style single-story building. In front of the red wooden gate, there were 3 stone steps rising. For the first time, Constantine pushed open the door and walked in. He entered a long corridor. There were some oil paintings hanging on the walls on both sides of the corridor. The contents of the paintings were similar. For example, on a dining table covered with a white tablecloth, pottery filled with milk was placed, placed in front of the dinner plate, which is filled with sliced and neatly stacked bread. Next to the dinner plate is a silver plate. On the silver plate is a bunch of red and round grapes like rubies, like pink peaches that exude a fragrance, and cut into pieces of watermelon with black seeds. Most of them are pictures depicting the scene of dining at the table. Every time you walk a certain distance, there will be 2 symmetrical statues on both sides of the corridor, all of which are characters from Greek legends, such as the peerless beauty Helen, and Prometheus who stole fire. After passing through the promenade, there is a spacious and spacious hall. A fluorescent crystal chandelier hangs on the top of the center of the hall. Just below the chandelier is a rectangular dining table. A middle-aged man and woman are sitting at both ends of the dining table. Luxurious, it is the parents of Constantine, the king and queen of Greece, His Majesty George I and Queen Olga. There was nothing in the empty hall except the dining table. Constantine walked towards the dining table. The shoes collided with the black and white tiles above the ground, making a harsh tap sound, which was very clear in the empty hall. The hall was so spacious that people walked around. The sound actually echoed. It is said that the reason why the restaurant was built like this is to prevent people with bad intentions from approaching the spacious and grand hall. With the hard black and white tiles laid in the hall, will undoubtedly reveal any abnormal noise. Constantine walked to the middle of the long dining table, pulled out a high-back chair and sat down. Your Majesty George, the beautiful Queen Olga, good morning. Constantine turned to the 2 of them respectively, bowing his head to greet them. Nina respectfully stood behind Constantine, her hands hanging on either side of her thighs. George stared at the newspaper in his hand, and replied without looking up, "Morning, Constantine has come, let's start the meal." As soon as he finished speaking, he put down the newspaper in his hand and placed it on the white tablecloth, put his hands together, "Papa," and clapped his palms 3 times. As soon as the applause fell, a line of male servants dressed in tuxedos with neatly combed hair, with his left hand behind his back and his right hand dragging a plate, came to the 3 of them in an orderly manner. After placing the breakfast neatly, he bowed. After bowing, maintaining the salute state, taking a few steps back, he returned to his normal posture and exited the restaurant. Because it is breakfast, it is not complicated. A plate of sliced oatmeal bread, jam in a plate, fruit salad with a silver plate device, inside this 1 grape and 2 slices of citrus cut in half, a glass of milk served in a glass, with some caviar as a condiment for the bread. Queen Olga first put the napkin on her chest, tidied it up, took a sip of the milk, then picked up a piece of bread, spread it with jam, took a bite, swallowed it, wiped her mouth with a handkerchief, and faced Constantine. Ding said, "My dear son, how is your African Congo expedition going?" Hearing his mother's question, Constantine was not flustered. He picked up the handkerchief on his left and wiped his mouth, before replying, "I have received the news that today, Mr. Stanley is from the team of explorers sponsored by me and His Majesty. Leader, I will come to Athens by boat today, firstly to report to us the progress of the expedition plan, and secondly to take this opportunity to rest for a while." Chapter 3, Sponsor African Explorers. Hearing Constantine's answer, Queen Olga insisted, "Constantine, I just want to remind you that up to now, your African exploration plan has cost 4 million francs, and the return, so far, is very few. A few rare African wood carvings of limited value, log records of African expeditions, and maps hand-painted by the explorers d'Or. Strange artwork of indigenous Africans brought back by adventurer Stanley, along with adventure maps and diaries to curry favor with his patrons, King George and Crown Prince Constantine, to show that he is not a liar and is indeed on adventures and exploration. This is the only return on the investment of 4 million francs so far. 4 million francs is a real huge sum of money in this era. 1 franc contains 0.29032258 grams of gold, and 4 million francs add up to 1.16 tons of gold. It is not the franc that has been shrinking after the First World War. Backed by the strong national strength of France, the value of the franc before the First World War was stable, and it was one of the important currencies in international circulation. Queen Olga held the bill in her hand and swayed it to Constantine and George. King George ate breakfast attentively and relished it. He picked up a grape and put it in his mouth. The sweet and sour grape juice overflowed the corner of his mouth. Then he picked up the napkin on the table and wiped the corner of his mouth. He didn't seem to care about the conversation between the two. If you want to get huge profits, you must be willing to invest huge amounts of money, Mom. This is the basic principle of business, Constantine answered vaguely while eating jam bread. Of course I understand this truth, but I want to remind you that your plan is too risky. The risk is very high, and it is likely to lose everything. Queen Olga looked at Constantine and reminded solemnly, "That is also an indispensable part of the payment to obtain huge profits." Constantine replied, "In Europe at the end of the 19th century, whether in London or Paris, the public was very interested in the news of overseas expeditions recorded in the newspapers, such as the sack of the British colonial leader Robert Clive in Bangladesh during the British invasion of India. Clive led the army to invade Bangladesh and looted the area. Clive alone stole gold and silver treasures worth £230,000. He brazenly boasted to the British Parliament, 'Under my feet there are rich cities, and in our hands a mighty country, and before me a treasury full of gold bars, silver ingots, pearls and gems has been opened. I have taken them all. 200,000 British pounds. Gentlemen, I still wonder why I am so polite. Whenever such news appears in the newspaper, it can be sold out and sold out.' People took newspapers to the streets, taverns or other places where there were many people, discussing a certain person's overseas heroic deeds loudly and enthusiastically, and said, 'What a lucky guy,' in an envious tone. In fact, this kind of news that people are keen on overseas adventures to obtain gold and silver treasures is a scene that people talk about with great relish. Ever since the era of great voyages opened the world, it has already appeared, but at that time, there was no large-scale release and sale. Just newspapers. The initiators are the famous Columbus, Da Gama and other pioneers of seafaring careers and overseas adventures. When the news of Columbus' discovery of India came, the entire continent of Europe was boiling. Actually, the American continent was discovered, but Columbus insisted that he discovered India. If you are confused when you look at the map and find that there is a large island called the West Indies in the waters of Central America, then blame Columbus for making a mistake. Period. Europeans will be wrong. They are too lazy to change. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the rise of the powerful Ottoman Turkey blocked the trade routes between the East and the West. The Ottoman Turks blocked the road and charged high taxes and tolls, making Eastern goods such as spices, peppers and chili peppers from India, silk and porcelain from East Asia more expensive, not cheap at all. The helpless Europeans can only set out towards the Western Sea, Atlantic, looking for a new route to the East. Newspaper operators are also fond of the people and are happy to publish adventure stories in the newspapers. They even go out in person and sponsor some adventurers to go on an adventure on the African continent. They have negotiated with the adventurers and want to exclusively report their adventures. As for why it was Africa and not the rest of the world, It was because at the end of the 19th century, the rest of the world had no sense of mystery in the age of navigation that began around 1500. America, Portugal and Spain were the first to be discovered. These two founders of the first colonial empires on which the sun never sets, soon colonized South and Central America. Why was there no colonization of North America, such as the United States and Canada? The reason is that they disliked it. At that time, North America did not have as many gold and silver mines and other tropical crops as South America, such as sugar cane and cocoa. In their eyes, North America was a land of bitter cold, so the situation in America is no longer mysterious as for Asia. It was clear by the end of the 19th century that Britain and France were in India and the Netherlands were colonizing the East Indies, Indonesia, archipelago. So at the end of the 19th century, for Europeans, there was still a foggy continent, and only the African continent remained. Africa is very close to Europe, separated only by a large bathtub like the Mediterranean Sea, but Gibraltar, Spain, and the African continent are across the sea. As early as in ancient Rome, Europeans fought wars in North Africa, but this does not mean that the African continent is easy to explore. You reading www.you can't you? The largest desert in the world, the Sahara Desert, completely separates southern Africa from North Africa. The vast expanse of desert, endless no man's land, interrupts any idea of exploring southern Africa from land. The humid, hot and rainy tropical rainforest climate in southern Africa is very unfriendly to Europeans compared with cold. Europeans are actually more afraid of heat, because they can effectively resist the cold, such as using bonfires, animal fur, cotton coats, etc. to keep out the cold. But Europeans are helpless to the heat, especially in southern Africa, which is humid, hot and rainy. Mosquitoes can easily breed malaria, dysentery and other diseases at the same time. Southern Africa does not have the incentives of huge gold and silver mines like the Americas. Therefore, at the end of the 19th century, due to the frequent overseas voyages and the increase in global trade, the African coastal areas were clearly understood by Europeans, but the inland areas of the African continent were still large blanks on the European maps. At that time, European geography was eager to figure out a question: where's the source of the Nile River? Are the Nile and Congo rivers the same source? Funded by European monarchs, geographic research organizations, newspapers and other institutions and individuals, adventurers have a desire to make huge profits and become rich, or driven by intense curiosity, or longing for a free wildlife, or purely called by the wild. Southern Africa has become a paradise for explorers. Obviously, Constantine was also one of them. He gave a lot of money to help explorers explore southern Africa, and the person he sponsored was the adventurer Mr. Stanley, a legend who was born in England, grew up in the United States, and returned to England when he became an adult. Under the influence of the adventurous boom, he rushed to southern Africa. Chapter 4, Possibility of getting Congo. Seemingly dissatisfied with her husband's inattentiveness, Queen Olga turned to George and said angrily, "George, are you not going to say something?" George picked up the napkin, wiped his mouth in a hurry, and said slowly, "For Constantine, this matter, whether his plan succeeds or fails, is a rare experience, and with my own from a point of view, there is a real possibility of success, although it is unlikely." I saw that Queen Olga was very dissatisfied when she heard her husband's supportive attitude, imitating George's tone, shaking her head and said, "Whether it is success or failure, it is a rare experience. George, you are really a good father." So far, Constantine's plan has spent 4 million francs, and depending on the situation, the cost will continue to be high. You better be mentally prepared. The so-called Constantine's plan was to fund explorers to go on expeditions to Central Africa. The explorers would receive honor and money, while Constantine would get colonies. The reason for taking such a risky chess is that he was forced to help Greece as a country that became independent from the Ottoman Empire in 1830, but the Greek peninsula is really not a suitable place for farming and development. With rolling hills and lack of resources, the theme of the 19th century was empire and conquest. Wars were frequent, and the strength of a country depended on the output of coal and iron, and Greece is not only sparsely populated, but also lacks coal and iron mines. Lignite is rich in content, but it has low calorific value, large combustion dust, and high sulfur content. It is the lowest quality coal. In the 19th century, this kind of coal could only be used to generate electricity. As for iron ore, there is no iron ore in Greece at all in the 19th century. Without coal and iron, such a country could only place soy sauce and have no sense of existence. Greece was such a country. By 1882, Greece had been independent for 50 years. The industry was still in a primitive state, and the transportation was backward, resulting in closed and conservative rural areas, outdated concepts, and backward agriculture. It even cost precious foreign exchange imports every year. Food. It's fine if she can't become an industrial country, but according to Greece's resource endowment, she can't even become an agricultural country. The country's strength is weak, and it can only be allowed to be arranged by the great powers, followed by the buttocks of the great powers, acting as a younger brother. Britain and France are still the protectorate of Greece. Economic backwardness naturally leads to political chaos. The term of the prime minister elected to power is as short as a dozen days, but as long as a year or so, changing like a marquee due to the long-term backward and barbaric rule of the Ottoman Turks. Although a constitution was formulated and universal suffrage was implemented, it was suddenly implemented. There were many drawbacks in the election process, and corruption in elections emerged one after another. Industry cannot be developed, and agriculture is not enough in order to maintain the country. Greece could only borrow a lot of foreign debts. The foreign debts in the 19th century could not be paid in full after borrowing, so they had to be discounted. Although nominally, Greece has become independent, the policies of this country are always influenced by various imperialist countries. Britain, France, and Russia have profound influence in Greece. In fact, Greece has never been independent. In the Crimean War of 1853, Britain, France and Turkey on one side, Russia on the other side, and nearly 1 million troops fought on the coast of the Black Sea. The attention of Ottoman Turkey was almost completely attracted by the Russians, and the Turks had no time to take care of Greece. Seeing this situation, the people in Greece were furious, and the nationalists shouted to recover the country and restore its glory. It was at this moment at that time, King Otto I was under great domestic pressure, and he was happy to take this opportunity to expand his territory, to enhance his prestige in the hearts of the Greek people, to mobilize the army, and to prepare for the war. As a result, Otto's actions aroused great dissatisfaction with Britain and France. British and French ambassadors came together, severely reprimanded King Otto, and sent a fleet to assemble in the eastern Mediterranean. Under the huge pressure of Britain and France, Otto could only compromise, but the Greek people were seriously dissatisfied, thinking that he was incompetent and weak, and Otto was deposed by the Greeks. In the original history, in the later World War, Greece staged a similar scene again, but this time the party involved was Constantine himself. When confronted with such a muddy situation in Greece, even if he was a transmigrator, Constantine was devastated. For a while the mouse is pulling the tortoise, there is nowhere to go. Once inadvertently, I heard King George say that European explorers are conducting expeditions in southern Africa, and he often sponsors some money. Constantine, who heard this, was moved. Isn't this a good opportunity to break the game? The bad situation in Greece will not change in a short time. People are not rich, and horses are not fat. It is better to check out opportunities abroad. If it fails, it will only lose some money. If it succeeds, if Greece can obtain an African colony rich in resources, it may not be able to hold the tail of the Second Industrial Revolution and grow stronger. At that time, the world was almost completely divided up. Only southern Africa was in a state of inconvenient transportation and was in a wild state. The indigenous Africans lived in the tribal era and were too backward. The cheap raw materials and commodities that the imperialist countries desperately needed were dumped in the market, and it could not provide them. Only Britain and France established several strongholds in southern Africa due to colonial activities and overseas trade, such as the Cape Town colony. So there are still large blank lands in the interior of southern Africa, such as the Congo River basin. Then, in a river with such a large flow of water as the Congo River, why does no one travel up the river by boat for commercial and adventure activities? The reason is also very simple. The lower reaches of the Congo River flow smoothly and the river is wide. It flows into the Atlantic Ocean from the west coast of Africa. However, if you sail inland along the river for about tens of kilometers, near Matadi, you will encounter the waterfall area in the lower reaches of the Congo River. There is a series of waterfalls that hinder people from upstream. With a veil of mystery, her true face is still unknown. In 1816, after the Napoleonic Wars, the Geographical Society of London was surprised that 3 centuries after the estuary of the Congo River had been discovered, there was still so little information about the river, so they commissioned Admiral Tucker to take the sailing ship Congo as responsible for exploring whether the Niger River and the Congo River are connected. This expedition was a huge disaster. They were stopped by the waterfall and could only cross the waterfall area on foot. The 65-person expedition team, including several experts and scholars, died one after another in the next half-century. No scientific expedition dared to venture to the Congo River again. A series of waterfalls on the Congo River has greatly reduced people's interest in this area. No matter how rich the resources of the Congo River basin are, the transportation is inconvenient, and the water transportation is not accessible. If it cannot be transported, it is meaningless unless a country decides to spend huge sums of money on railways in the Congo River basin, bypassing the waterfalls of the Congo River and other tributaries of the Congo River. This is almost impossible until the data and geographical information of scientific expeditions are not available to understand the resource status of Congo in the original time and space. The commodities produced in the early days of the Congo River basin were rubber and ivory. With these two commodities, the huge investment in railway construction would have to wait until the year of the monkey to make money in the original time and space. King Leopold II of Belgium was in charge of this role, but after Leopold II in this time and space asked a geographer, read www.ucanchu.com did not make up their minds. It is precisely because the development of the Congo River basin requires a lot of investment, and the specific conditions such as geography, society, and natural resources are still unclear. As a result, no other countries have shown much interest so far. After Constantine knew about this situation, he told George I his thoughts. After listening to Constantine's reasons, George I also felt that there was a possibility of success. This possibility depends on two conditions. It is difficult for the first Congo region to develop and gain profits. Colonial powers, such as Britain and France, have vast colonies. Instead of investing money in the Congo River basin, which is hot, and rainy, and the return risk is relatively high, it is better to invest in other places with higher returns and lower risks, such as South Africa in the United Kingdom, France, Vietnam, much more beneficial than the Congo River basin. This point determines that Britain and France will not stalk and entangle desperately in the Congo region. The location of the second Congo River basin is important. Open the map, and you will understand that the Congo River basin is located in the center of Africa. If a powerful country occupies this place and has a firm foothold, it will definitely attack everywhere, expand in Africa, and other countries that colonize the fringes of Africa are very passive. This determines that, whether Britain, France or Germany and Italy, these countries that have the will of colonial expansion, even if they have the idea of occupying the Congo basin, other countries will strongly oppose it. Combining these 2 points, it seems impossible for a country like Greece that is weak and can be controlled by them at will, but it is the most likely to get the Congo. After thinking about these 2 points, whether or not to bet heavily on Congo, there is only one decisive question left. Is Congo worth betting heavily? Chapter 5, Congo and number 039, rich resources. Is the Congo River basin worth spending a lot of resources on? For European countries that have not yet understood the specific conditions of the Congo River basin, they must have doubts. This determines that European countries will not pay too much attention to the Congo River basin, but this question did not exist for Constantine. There are a large number of natural rubber forests growing in the Congo River basin. Rubber trees like high temperature, high humidity, calm wind and fertile soil. They require an average annual temperature of 26 to 27 degrees Celsius, and they can grow and produce rubber normally within the range of 20 to 30 degrees Celsius. They are not cold resistant. Freezing damage occurs when the temperature is below 5 degrees Celsius. The annual average precipitation is required to be 1150 to 2500 millimeters, but it should not be planted in places with low humidity. It is suitable for the growth of deep, fertile and moist, well-drained acidic sandy loam soil. Shallow roots, weak branches, poor adaptability to wind, easy to suffer from wind chill and reduced gum yield. These conditions are completely compatible with the Congo River basin. The Congo River basin is crossed by the equator and distributed in the north and south of the equator. High temperature and rain are the climatic characteristics of the Congo River basin. At the end of the 19th century, in the Second Industrial Revolution, the internal combustion engine was an epoch-making invention. The automobile industry developed rapidly. The main material of automobile tires was rubber. The rapid development of the automobile industry made rubber quickly become one of the important raw materials. Volume increased sharply. Speaking of which, the demise of the Qing government can still be related to rubber. In the late Qing dynasty, when the railway was built in Sichuan, and the Qing government was in financial difficulties, the people of Sichuan spontaneously raised funds and sold railway stocks. As a result, after waiting for 2 or 3 years, there was no news of the railway. When the Qing government saw it, "It's okay, don't build it. I can't expect you to do anything. I'll use the foreign mortgage loan to build a railway. When the people of Sichuan heard the news, the public sentiment was turbulent. The Qing government did this, and the railway stocks bought by the people were worthless and went to waste. There were riots everywhere. After the Wuhan revolutionaries heard the news, the uprising responded and the Qing government died under certain historical conditions in the late Qing dynasty. The people were very sensitive to borrowing from foreign countries to build railways, which almost amounted to losing their power and humiliating the country because foreigners build railways. They often also require the right to garrison troops along the railway, the right to develop mineral resources, and other rights. In fact, the Qing government was also a little wronged, because the money raised by the Sichuan Railway was catching up with a rubber stock frenzy at the time. The major shareholders were carrying money from the people, embezzling money, and using the money to fry rubber stocks. As a result, the rubber stocks plummeted. The silver was lost naturally, the railway could not be repaired without money, and the management could not contain the fire. It has been delayed for 2 or 3 years. Whenever people inquired, they would prevaricate as they are exploring the route. What should I do? When the major shareholders were at a loss, the Qing government announced that the Sichuan Railway would be reclaimed by the state and borrowed from foreign powers to build it as for the money raised by the poor and deceived people later. What happened to it? It was a bad debt, and it was over. The rubber boom at the end of the 19th century is evident, not to mention other things. Just a rubber planting industry has a lot to do in Congo. In addition, there are a huge number of African elephants in the Congo River Basin, where they live and reproduce, and the ivory carvings are white and delicate. Animal protectionists, don't scold me. I didn't say it, I didn't do it, and I didn't kill it. Loved by nobles and merchants, such as folding fans with ivory hollowed out skeletons, jewelry boxes carved from ivory, and pianos with ivory keys. According to the statistics of later generations, there were several million elephants living in Gang Kingdom at the end of the 19th century. In addition to rubber and ivory, Africa is blessed with abundant metal deposits. The later Democratic Republic of Congo has the names of World Raw Material Warehouse, Central African Gem, and Geological Miracle. Congo's copper mines account for 15% of the world's total copper mine reserves, and just Katwanga province alone accounts for 7%. One of the main features of the Second Industrial Revolution is electrification. With electricity in the production and life of human society, a large number of applications need to use a large amount of copper wire, and the demand for copper in Europe is growing rapidly. In addition to the propellers of ships, bullets and shells, and even coins, Congo's copper mines not only have high reserves, but also have high grades of copper ore. There are several million tons of copper mines with a copper content of 30%. What is the concept of 30%? You must know that in later generations, copper reserves of 2% in China can be said to be a bonanza. This is not because Huangsha copper reserves are low, but entirely because of the long development history and large scale of Huangsha copper mine. In most of the history of China, copper was synonymous with money, and copper coins were used on a large scale in all dynasties of China. In the impression of later generations, influenced by unscrupulous film and television works, ancient people seem to use silver as currency, but the concept of copper coins is weak. In fact, it was quite late in China to use silver as currency on a large scale. Before the Ming Dynasty, copper coins were used in large quantities. After the Ming Dynasty, because the Spanish colonists discovered a large number of silver mines in the Americas, the Spanish treasure ships, carrying silver and other American specialties, departed from Chile and Peru, crossed the South Pacific by winds and waves, and came to the Philippines. The Philippines was a Spanish colony, and traded with Ming sea merchants. The Spanish colonists purchased large quantities of silk, tea, and porcelain from China, and merchants in the coastal areas of Jiangsu and Zhejiang and Guangdong and Fujian made a fortune through transactions. A large amount of silver flowed into the Ming Dynasty, which directly changed the Chinese people's concept that money is copper. From this, the first generation of local tyrants in China was born. The wealthy rich owners who made a lot of money because of sea trade could not get in. They were worried that future generations would ruin their family business, so they melted the silver into silver lumps, and then buried in the cellar. The soil is not soil, the real soil. Is it proud or not? How proud? You reading www.uucanchu.com. However, due to the high value of the precious metal silver, it was actually only used in large-scale trade. At that time, the common people used copper coins in large quantities. Just like in the 1980s and 1990s, a lot of people came into contact with $1, 5 cents, and 100 yuan bills, so a lot of copper was consumed in China. Therefore, The copper in the Congo River basin is of great significance to Greece. The diamond reserves in the Kasai area are huge, and the later Gang Kingdom is the most important producer of industrial diamonds in the world. As for the gold in Eastern Province, according to later estimates, the amount of gold mined in the Congo Kingdom reaches tens of thousands of kilograms. The content of uranium ore is also very rich. Yes, it is the uranium used in the atomic bomb. During World War II, the Americans spent a lot of time trying to obtain the uranium ore from the Republic of Congo. As for other metals, whether they are rare metals, lead, manganese, zinc, tin, tungsten, lithium, platinum, palladium, etc., don't ask what metals are in the country, just ask what metals there are in the country. Congo is not only rich in metal resources, but also in forest resources. The main vegetation in Congo can be roughly divided into two types: forest and savanna. Almost 48% of the entire area of the Congo River basin is covered by forests. The area of tropical rainforest in the Congo region is second only to the Amazon tropical forest in South America, and is called the second lung of the earth. There are 25 kinds of precious woods in the forest, such as ebony, mahogany, ash wood, rosewood and yellow lacquer wood. What kind of mahogany furniture? That's not a problem. In addition, tropical crops such as cocoa, sugarcane and cotton can also be grown. Cotton can be used in the textile industry and cocoa can be used in chocolate. Congo's hot, rainy and high temperature climate is also very suitable for growing sugarcane. Sugarcane can be used to make sugar, and its economic value is huge. Chapter 6, Constantine and number 039, S. Suggestion. Constantine, you will go to Piraeus port to meet Mr. Stanley today. Remember to be more enthusiastic. He is a hero now. George I raised his head and said to Constantine, the port of Piraeus is the outer port of Athens, the capital of Greece, and the largest port in Greece. Okay, Nina, tell steward Capet, let him prepare the carriage, and say we are going to the port of Piraeus. Constantine turned to Nina, who was standing behind him. Nina took the order and turned to leave. Constantine took the last bite of bread, stood up and said to Queen Olga and King George, then I'll go. After speaking, he slowly took 2 steps back and turned to leave the restaurant. In the dining room, Queen Olga looked at the figure of Constantine leaving, and said to George faintly, I'm just worried that if Constantine's plan fails, it will be a huge blow. He is no longer a child. He should experience some things himself. If the little lion has not been brutally tempered, he will not become a king. George I read the newspaper attentively, and said without raising his head. Constantine came to the yard and saw a carriage parked on the gravel road in the yard from a distance. The driver was sitting high in the driver's seat in front of the carriage, with a wide field of vision, a whip in his hand, and 2 purplish-red horses. Shishi. Shaking his head and sneezing, 4 oil lamps were placed on the 4 corners of the carriage, 4 well-armed knights were distributed in front and back, and butler Capet was standing in front of the car door. Your Excellency, the carriage is ready. Wearing a black tuxedo and a white shirt with a bow made of blue silk, Capet opened the carriage door. Uncle Capet, you're still so polite. Constantine was very familiar with Capet. As long as he can remember, Capet has been a housekeeper in the royal family. Etiquette can't be broken. Your Excellency, butler Capet replied with a smile. When Constantine saw this, he didn't insist anymore. He raised his legs and stepped into the front seat of the carriage, only to find Nina, who was wearing a long blue silk dress, also sitting inside. You. Constantine pointed at Nina in surprise, just as he was about to speak, but saw Nina put her finger in front of her mouth. SHHH, winked at Constantine with a wink, and showed a pleading expression on her face. Look. Immediately, Constantine reacted. He turned around and looked behind him. There was nothing unusual. He closed the car door with his left hand and said in a controlled voice, let's go, butler. Capet came to the driver, raised his head and said to the driver sitting high in the driver's seat, Kafka, be careful on the road. The coachman gave you a reassuring expression, threw an empty whip, and with a slap sound, the 4 knights heard the signal and immediately turned on their horses. With a sound, the convoy slowly drove towards the iron fence gate of the manor. After the gate was opened by the guard, the convoy slowly passed through. Nina in the carriage let out a long breath, hummed an unknown song, leaned forward, put her head in front of the car window, pulled the window cloth with her left hand, and looked at the scenery outside Tatoi Palace is located in the deep forest in the north of Athens. On both sides of the road leading to Athens, tall and dense forests cross paths. The rising sun occasionally passes through the treetops and shines into the carriage. The sound broke the silence of the forest, and several birds flew away, flapping their wings and flying away looking at Nina, who is looking at the scenery outside curiously. Constantine said warmly, "Nina, have you ever thought about a life outside the palace?" "Yes, will life outside the palace be very free?" Nina continued to look at the scenery outside the window without turning her head. Nina is 17 years old. Under the guidance of her previous tutor, she has completed her pre-university courses. Nina is so smart that the tutor who was originally invited by Constantine didn't mind taking Nina as an extra student. Queen Olga always compared the results of the two and made fun of the gentleman. Tanton, "Nina, do you want to study at the University of Athens?" Nina doesn't like palace life. She is actually a lively and cheerful girl. The royal palace is full of red tape and strict rules. Nina's character is out of tune with the royal life. Although Nina was very smart and adapted to court life well, from the bottom of her heart, Constantine knew that Nina didn't like it. He hoped that Nina could become an independent woman who is knowledgeable and assertive. If not, Constantine could not rest assured, and let Nina, a playmate who grew up with her since childhood, adapt to the complex and exciting external world. When I think of my mother, Queen Olga's personal maid, Miss Avrora, who is dowry from Russia, with a gloomy face all day long, and then look at Nina, who is in the best years of her life and is in full bloom, although a little reluctant, he still hardened his heart and said his plan. Life in the palace is monotonous and boring. Some of the male and female servants entered the palace since childhood to learn etiquette and literacy. They cannot fall in love in the royal palace. They are all in charge of the necessities of life. They have lived in the palace for a long time. UUCanchu.com will be released from the palace, and there are often people who cannot adapt to life outside the palace and request to return to the palace. They have adapted to the life in the palace and are used to being told what work they should do every day, because they have not been in contact for many years, and their families have been estranged. Miss Avrora, she is 50 years old this year and has not married yet, so she called him Miss. She couldn't adapt to the ordinary married life, and she didn't plan to get married again. She is the steward of the maid in the palace, and the male waiter is managed by the butler. But Constantine didn't want his playmate, Nina, to meet the same fate as Miss Avrora and live like a withered wood for the rest of his life. When Nina heard Constantine's words, she immediately turned her head, looked at Constantine in surprise, and said, I haven't made up my mind yet. You're very smart. It's a pity not to go to university, and you don't want to stay in the palace all your life. Constantine looked at her with pity. Nina was an orphan. After she was born, she was sent to the church. She was sent to the palace since she was a child. She followed Queen Olga and was raised by Miss Avrora. Although Miss Avrora has a straight face all day, she has a very close relationship with Nina, and she treats Nina like her own daughter. After you go back today, discuss it with Miss Avrora, Constantine advised. Nina nodded hesitantly, as if considering Constantine's proposal. There was silence in the carriage for a while, and both of them were thinking about their own thoughts. How much money does the Congo expedition need to have a result? It's really annoying. The carriage gradually entered the port area, and the environment became more and more noisy. The long whistle of woo-woo was heard in the distance. It seemed that the port of Piraeus was approaching. I don't know what. Good news for Stanley. Chapter 7, Meet Stanley. As the carriage drove into the bustling area of the port, there were more and more two-story Greek-style buildings on both sides of the road, and there were more and more carriages on the flagstone road, silently keeping a distance from the flamboyant royal motorcade. The convoy stopped in front of a hotel with a garden turntable surrounded by bricks and stones. The doorman in a red suit hurriedly trotted from the front of the hotel to the door of the car, opened the door, leaned forward, and said with a bowed body, "Welcome, Your Excellency. What can I do for you? I am going to receive a distinguished guest at your hotel today and prepare a seat for me," Constantine said. "Are you waiting here to bring guests?" The doorman said with a smile. "Yes, then let me show you the way, Your Excellency." Okay. After speaking, the doorman pulled the door of the car with both hands and stood aside. When Constantine and Nina got out of the carriage, they trotted to the front and stretched out their right hand in an inviting gesture. Nina wrapped her arms around Constantine's arms and looked at the scene in the hotel curiously. When he came to the front desk, a middle-aged man in a black uniform trotted over with sweat on his forehead, and took over the position of the doorman. The doorman stuck his head and whispered a few words in front of the middle-aged man's ear. Afterwards, the middle-aged man bowed and said, "Welcome to our hotel. I am the front desk manager of the hotel. You can ask me if you have any requirements. Do you need us to send a carriage to the pier to welcome your distinguished guests here?" "Okay, it's a gentleman named Stanley, who is scheduled to take the cruise from London to Piraeus this morning," Constantine ordered. During the conversation, The manager led Constantine and his party to a box, opened the doors of the two boxes and said, "Your Excellency, this is the best box in our hotel. Sitting in this box, you can enjoy the sun, the beautiful scenery of the coast and the busy scene of the pier." He opened the black silk curtains in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of the box with a clatter, and then opened the window in the distance on the sea, seagulls flying and ships coming and going with a long whistle woo-woo. The sea breeze with a fishy smell blew in, wrapped in curtains and squeaked. Curious baby Nina ran to the window, leaned out from the window, waved her hands excitedly towards the distant shore, and shouted loudly after the manager said. He carefully looked at Constantine's expression and saw that there was no impatient expression on his face, so he let out a sigh of relief. Constantine looked around for a while. The furnishings in the box were not very gorgeous, but they were better than clumsy. In front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, there were two brown sofas surrounding a reception table. He was satisfied and nodded to the manager. The manager turned and left, and the four knights were divided into two columns to guard in front of the box door. Then the manager turned around and left. Constantine sat on the sofa, quietly waiting for Stanley's arrival, thinking about Stanley in his mind. Stanley became famous in the search for British explorer and missionary David Livingstone in 1868. Stanley accepted the commission of the Paris newspaper to find Mr. David Livingstone, who had lost contact with the British in Central Africa. At that time, the latter had been missing for 2 years. Is David Livingstone still alive? At that time, public opinion in European and American countries was very concerned. In 1871, Stanley's expedition came to Zanzibar on the east coast of Africa, the coast of the Indian Ocean. The expedition set off from the coast of what is now Tanzania, and after a long journey of 8 months, finally found Livingstone in Ujiji on the shore of Lake Tanganyika. Stanley and Livingstone's encounter began with a brief question well known in the history of exploration. Stanley stepped forward into a clearing in the jungle where Livingstone was sitting. Stanley held out his hand and said, "You're Dr. Livingstone, I suppose." After finding Livingstone, Stanley kept secret and wrote a book, How I Found Livingstone in the UK, taking the opportunity to hype himself. This book was a hit after Livingstone died in 1873. Stanley declared himself Livingstone's successor in 1877. Stanley successfully reached the estuary of the Atlantic Ocean and became the first European to complete the whole line from the source of the Congo River, the coast of the Indian Ocean in Africa, to the mouth of the sea, the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. Later, he wrote a book through the African continent, which recorded the expedition in detail. Undoubtedly, this book detailing southern Africa caused a stir from Stanley's past deeds. It is not difficult to find that this is a person who can keenly seize opportunities and is quite scheming and wise. No wonder it stands out from the crowd of adventurers. This series of events also attracted the attention of Georgia and Constantine. Constantine believed that Mr. Stanley, a veteran who has been engaged in African exploration for a long time, must be very familiar with the geography and humanities of Africa and is the best choice for implementing the African plan. At the insistence of Constantine, King George I ordered the Greek ambassador to the UK to contact the renowned African adventure expert, and bought Stanley 5 for 10,000 francs before the Belgian king, who also had ambitions for Africa. Time of year. At that time, a worker who worked hard for a year received a salary of about 30-50 francs. There is no doubt that 10,000 francs is a generous reward for an individual. They reached an agreement. According to the contract, Stanley worked for George and Constantine in Congo for 5 years, without the prior consent of the two, not to announce any news, and not to hold any report meeting from 1879 to the present. In 1882, Stanley was implementing this plan with a large sum of money given by Constantine. Stanley recruited a group of outlaws from Europe, promised generous rewards, and went to Africa in a mighty way. After almost 4 years, Constantine needed a result. Constantine, who was contemplating, suddenly heard footsteps in front of the door. It seemed that a guest was coming. With a creak, the door was opened. One was wearing a beige suit and a yellow bowler hat. Bronze skin leaked from his face and the collar of his shirt. His eyes were piercing, and he had 2 fluffy mustaches on his mouth. A man in his 40s who was in his prime, with a red suitcase in his left hand and a cane in his right hand, walked, and a fierce breath came on coming. Speaking of which, this is the first time the two have met. Before that, the two had only communicated through letters and telegrams. Constantine stood up and extended his right hand to Stanley. Stanley put the suitcase in his hand on the ground and shook hands with each other. "Welcome to Greece, Mr. Stanley," Constantine greeted, respecting this key figure in the realization of the African plan. "Thank you for your hospitality, Your Excellency," Stanley replied Constantine's title was the Duke of Sparta. Yes, he was the Spartan warrior who advocated force and agile folk customs, the earliest city-state of Athens, Greece, and was full of tendons. This habit has been passed down from the United Kingdom, similar to the fact that the Crown Prince of the United Kingdom generally holds the title of Prince of Wales. To be honest, for a ruthless man like Stanley, who was born in the bottom of the United Kingdom and put his life on his belt in order to succeed in his career, he really doesn't think much of a man like Constantine who was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. People suffering from civil misery. As long as I think about how much suffering I have suffered, how many crimes I have suffered, how many times my life has been endangered in Africa, which is savage, ignorant and uncivilized, I need to give my life to the cause of struggle, and the guy in front of me is born with everything. I got it, and I can't reach it in my life. Thinking of this, Stanley felt indignant. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelists. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, African News. The two sat opposite each other across the reception table. Mr. Stanley, can you tell me something interesting about Africa? Constantine said. Hearing these words, Stanley looked at the young duke in front of him, thinking to himself, he seems to be a child who likes strange things in a foreign country. Okay. Stanley said, glancing at Nina by the window, he's my maid, Nina. It doesn't matter. Constantine saw Stanley's actions. Okay, let's talk about what I saw in Africa. Our expedition team bought some unsaleable cotton cloth from London that had been backlogged for many years, as well as some clothes that were pressed in the warehouse, or simply some clothes that were thrown away. It can be said that in any country in Europe, those things cannot be sold, and the cotton cloth is not so much a cotton cloth as it is white clay and paste, Stanley said. But what can cotton have to do with white clay and paste? Obviously, African stories are more attractive than the coastal scenery outside the window, Nina asked curiously. A beautiful and lovely lady like you really doesn't know the way inside. Those profiteers will rack their brains to cut costs and increase profits. How to use very little cotton thread to weave cotton cloth that feels particularly thick. The secret is to hang the paste. The woven cotton cloth is passed through the paste. Some profiteers directly hang the paste with white clay mud. The cotton cloth treated in this way is thick and bright to the touch. Seeing that young and beautiful girls also like to listen to stories, Stanley is more interested in telling them, this kind of cotton can't deceive people, can it? Isn't it exposed after one wash? Nina was even more curious. Yeah, whoever buys this kind of inferior cloth, as long as he takes it home and washes it once, it will shrink, and it will no longer be as thick and bright as before. Do Africans also buy those ragged clothes? Nina looked in disbelief. Haha, how come no one buys it? Do you know which natives are and what do they usually wear? Stanley said that he was even happier here. What? To wear, it should be animal skins. Since they are called natives, they are ignorant and will definitely not be able to make clothes. Nina replied, no, the temperature in the Gango River Basin stays at 25 to 40 degrees all year round. Where can you wear animal skins? It will be hot to death. They wear some clothes made of hay and leaves. Guess what? Stanley seemed to be getting happier. Leaves are woven into clothes. Nina's eyes widened in disbelief. Constantine nodded thoughtfully. It seems that Africans also have purchasing power, but Mr. Stanley, there's one thing I don't quite understand. The goods you brought, let's try to calculate the goods. What do the Africans use to buy them? I mean, they don't have pounds or francs. Come and pay the bill. Constantine asked. It seems that he did not expect Constantine to ask such a direct question, and Stanley was a little surprised. Of course they don't have sterling francs, but they still have their own simple currency, a copper rod, which the locals use for trading currency. Of course, we occasionally trade some food, such as cassava, bananas, and I also get some ivory at times, Stanley explained. So, it seems that the copper mines of Ganguo are indeed rich. Constantine asked, I'm afraid it's not just the copper mines that are rich in reserves. There are elephants everywhere. If the ivory merchants saw it, they would definitely go crazy. When the local people saw us accepting ivory, they turned around and took out a lot of ivory to trade. According to my guess, I'm afraid they took it from a dead elephant, Stanley replied. In The Congo River Basin. The most popular thing is that we bring knives from Europe. In order to get a sharp European steel knife, they don't hesitate to exchange their entire net worth, Stanley said proudly. It can be seen that this guy has made a lot of extra money. In the past 2 or 3 years, I am afraid that the money he earned from those Africans may not be as good as what Constantine paid him, and, in Kinshasa, our home base, where the Congolese have a quirk that, in order to get a European fashion, they would rather go hungry, lay hands on us, work, just to wear clothes from civilized Europe, especially the clothes in Paris. They do everything they can for a bright and beautiful dress. What's even weirder is that those people are wearing European fashion that they have tried their best to show off in public, and the Africans around them will use envy, looking at them jealously. Honestly, I can't understand their show-off mentality, Stanley said. Really? Spending all of your fortune just for a luxury item? Where can someone be so stupid? Nina's eyes widened in disbelief. It's a pity that you can't go to Africa. The world is huge and full of wonders, not only luxury goods. Those tribal chiefs, after seeing us hunting with rifles, were all stunned and often asked our expedition members if they could sell them some rifle. If you want something to trade, we will sell it, Stanley said with pride. It seems that African adventures are indeed profitable. It is strange that so many people rush to Europe. It turns out that the adventure itself can make a fortune. It seems that Mr. Stanley must have made a lot of money from Africans, right? Even Constantine had a taste for it. With Lao's huge sponsorship, he made a lot of money from his own extra money. This is not a waste of money. What? Stanley seemed to see what Constantine was thinking, and quickly said, it's not all pleasant memories. After all, in the uncivilized southern African continent, there are also many tribes, not so easy to talk. Not all Africans have theirs the concept of trading, and there are malicious intent, robbery, Stanley explained. Not only that, people on the expedition often get sick and die. You also know the climate of the Congo River Basin, hot, high temperature and rainy, malaria, dysentery, and annoying mosquitoes. In Africa, where there is little medical treatment, almost everyone talk about a discoloration, Stanley said here, feeling a little down. Your Excellency, most Africans are very optimistic and always have a smile on their faces. I think this is probably their natural character. In the Congo River Basin, plants are evergreen throughout the year, and there is no shortage of food throughout the year. For them, it is a feeling that they have never experienced, and I think they probably will not have this word in their vocabulary. Although compared to Europe, they are uncivilized and do not have the advanced science and technology as us, but they live very happy, self-sufficient, and laugh a lot. Sometimes I even think, what's wrong with living as mediocre and ignorant as they are? On the contrary, we, Europeans who claim to be civilized and wise, rack our brains. Satisfy your own desires, be busy, and run around all day. Said here, Stanley's mood was even lower. Chapter 9, Africa, the Unknown Evil. Hearing Stanley's words, the room was quiet for a while. No matter who, after learning that he did something bad, as long as he didn't lose his conscience, he would easily feel guilty. The sudden intrusion of Europeans broke the peaceful life of the local indigenous people for thousands of years. Mr. Stanley, you don't have to be so passive. This is probably the price you have to pay for civilization. Constantine comforted, the price that must be paid to go to civilization. Nina and Stanley were a little puzzled when they heard Constantine's words. It is recorded in the Bible that God created the ancestors of mankind, Adam and Eve. He built a paradise for them in a place called Eden. The garden was filled with wonderful flowers and fruits, and all kinds of trees grew there. The ground was sprinkled with gold, pearls and onyx. A rich river flowed through the garden and nourished the land. By the gift of God, the estate was full of grain and fruit, said Constantine. Nina and Stanley listened attentively to Constantine's narration. There is nothing unusual about this story. As long as most Christians know this story, there must be more to it. Eve and Adam lived happily in the manor, enjoying all kinds of harvests in the garden, wandering freely, unfettered, and never knowing what troubles were. Until one day, the two people who were tempted ate the forbidden fruit in the garden and were offended. God, and was driven out of the Garden of Eden. The two listened to Constantine's words, contacted the situation of the African natives before, and fell into contemplation. Since then, they have entered paradise lost. People have to work to get food for their stomachs. They work hard, only for food to live on. They can't be liberated until they enter the ground. Constantine said, maybe. This is the price that must be paid for entering civilization. The beginning of civilization was a disaster that violated human nature. Countless people have fantasized about having such a paradise without sweating their backs and working the land. If you work in the middle, you can get any food, you can travel at ease, and you won't have troubles. Constantine himself felt deeply touched by this, perhaps. Now is the time for the people of southern Africa to enter paradise lost. Of course, these are biblical stories and don't have to be taken too seriously. And we are far from the snake that lured Africans into eating the forbidden fruit, Avenue Shadden, lured by snakes. You know where the Portuguese started the slave trade in the 16th century, where the local chiefs fought with Portuguese muskets and used captives to trade goods with the Portuguese. Constantine said, what's more, there is no paradise there. Before the Portuguese came, their tribes were not fighting for hegemony, such as the Kingdom of Congo, the Kingdom of Cuba, all feudal regimes established by the indigenous people of the Congo River in Africa, etc., so we don't have to burden ourselves with such a heavy moral burden. Constantine seemed to console himself. Besides, the notorious slave trade is now rarely engaged by the Portuguese, but the Arabs are rampant. Constantine said indeed, when it comes to the slave trade, people first think of the evil European colonists who sold black people to the plantations in the Americas as laborers for the sake of profit. Those slave owners in the Americas brutally oppressed and abused their slaves indeed. This is a historical fact, but it is only a partial fact in the evil interest chain of the slave trade, which is monstrous and violates human relations, which manor and slave owners in the Americas are the downstream of this interest chain. European colonists were responsible for buying black slaves, then transporting them to the Americas and sending them to slave owners, playing an intermediary role in this chain of interests. So who is playing the upstream role in this chain of interests? That is, who personally captured black people, looted black villages, slaughtered black people who dared to resist, turned black women and children into slaves, and then sold them to European colonists as intermediaries? Isn't this a louse on a bald head, an obvious thing? Not the slaves captured by the European colonists. It is true that some of them were captured by the European colonists themselves, but only a small part of them. Most of the black people who were trafficked were actually bought from others. The upper reaches of the chain of interests, that is, those who personally arrest slaves and sell them, and those who play this role are not only the European colonizers themselves. In the early days of the Portuguese era of great voyages, some people once caught slaves, but it was only a small amount, for a very short period of time. Although the Portuguese is a colonial power, its national strength has not been strong. He mainly relies on trade to make money, unlike the Netherlands, Britain, and France, which are not only powerful in trade but also in industry. Portugal's strength has always been weak, and its population is sparse. Therefore, the Portuguese are unable to capture a large number of slaves in Africa. The Portuguese national strength is weak, so they are more inclined to obtain slaves through trade, such as muskets, glass or some other European goods. During the main period of the slave trade, European slaves were purchased from the Arab kingdoms or Bantu kingdoms on the coast of Africa, rather than the Europeans themselves. Most of the slave providers are forgotten by the world. They are Arabs. Until the end of the 19th century, European colonists only set up strongholds on both sides of the coast of Africa or some navigable rivers to facilitate trade. Their control over Africa is far from being as strong as the colonial map of Africa shows. And even a large part of the territory is only assigned to a certain European politician on the map of Europe. Countries, but the overlord countries may not have actually controlled most of the colonies from beginning to end. They just dispatched officials to manage certain key areas, such as mining areas, and some areas suitable for growing commercial crops. In other words, Europeans are incapable of going deep into the African interior, capturing black people on a large scale and selling them as slaves. After all, there is no railway in Africa, and the world has not invented airplanes and automobiles, which makes Europeans powerless to arrest black slaves on a large scale. In addition, the white people in Europe are not suitable for the climate of Africa. At that time, there were no effective drugs for many diseases. For example, the invention of artemisinin to treat malaria happened after World War II. Cinchona was used to treat malaria before. The bark has serious side effects. Everyone knows that European whites, in the era of monstrous colonialism, carried out evil black slave trade operations, and African blacks were captured in large numbers all over the world to serve as lowly laborers. But few people have paid attention to the 1,000-year-old, Enduring slave trade history of the Arabs and the Arab world in the Middle East has never reflected on its own history of slave trade. This is different from the European Caucasian until the 21st century. The Black Africa south of the Sahara Desert and the White Africa north of the desert have no relationship because the Arab countries are deaf and dumb about their history of engaging in mass trafficking of blacks. The Arabs in the Middle East are the first organized and large-scale African slave trade in human history. The history of slave trade is far earlier than the Western slave trade. Chapter 10, The Situation in Africa. By the way, speaking of slave traders, Arab slave traders in the Congo River Basin are the harassing frequently. Constantine said to Stanley, "Why? Is it not frequent? Europeans go to Africa just to seek money. These Arabs are really vicious. They set off from the east coast of Africa, especially Zanzibar Island, which is the base camp of their Arab slave traders. They often explore with us." The mercenaries of the team clashed and exchanged fire. When these came to the villages of the African indigenous people, as long as they dared to resist, they would kill them all, then kidnap the young children, and serve as slaves with docile women, even the missionaries of the Catholic Church. "I can't stand it anymore." At this point, Stanley seemed to think of something interesting and paused. "If one day you go to southern Africa and see many Christians, don't be surprised. Since the age of voyages, there have been missionaries from Europe going to southern Africa one after another. You will never guess that their first missionary trick." "Haha," Stanley laughed. "Missionary methods?" Nina asked in confusion. "What other methods can missionaries have? A priest preaches the Bible to those who worship God." No. Stanley was very proud of Nina's failure to guess correctly, and deliberately made fun of the little girl. Their initial missionary method was to kidnap local nobles or powerful people, and then preach to them about God until they convert. "God, let them go. Isn't it fun, you say?" Stanley said. "There is still such a missionary." Nina's eyes widened in disbelief. "By the way, just last year, an expedition led by the French Brazzaville planted the French flag in the northern part of the Congo River, now called Brazzaville. Kinshasa, plant the flag of the Council of the Congo," Stanley said cautiously, looking at Constantine. According to the original plan, in the north of the Congo River, Constantine personally informed Stanley, but this guy didn't care and let the French take the lead. "Hey." Constantine sighed in his heart. Historically, the Kingdom of Gang, Brazzaville, was a colony of the French, but it still hasn't changed the situation. Of course, it could also be that Stanley judged the situation and did not dare to offend the French. Although the French were defeated by the Germans in the Franco-Prussian War, they were still a foreign power that Greece could not provoke. "How many strongholds and treaty agreements have your expedition built?" Constantine asked. "In various European countries, the basis for determining the ownership of colonies is the actual occupation or the agreements signed with the chief. The actual occupation is the business contact point established by the businessman. It's a mandate treaty. This is the basis for determining the ownership of a colony. For a small country like Greece, it may not be able to get a colony if it has this thing, but if it doesn't, it will definitely not get it." We went upstream along the Congo River as planned, setting up more than a dozen strongholds along the way, and signing more than 100 rights transfer treaties, Stanley replied. "You need to speed up the progress. Countries are expanding rapidly to Africa. By the way, based on your experience in Africa for so many years, what do you think of the development prospects of the Congo River Basin?" Stanley asked. After Stanley heard Constantine's question, he frowned and thought, "If you're talking about development prospects and you mean making money, Your Excellency the Duke, probably won't be happy to hear it," Stanley said while touching his chin with his right hand. "What does this mean?" Stanley was nervous. He thought he could hear some encouraging words, but Stanley's words were more like pouring cold water. The Congo River Basin is densely covered and crisscrossed, not only the Congo River, but also many tributaries of the Congo River, with abundant rainfall and stable water flow, because the equator passes through the Congo River Basin. During the dry season, the north of the equator is the rainy season, and vice versa. The tributaries of the Congo River are distributed in the north and south of the equator. They take turns to inject abundant water into the downstream Congo River. "From my experience, it has a very high water transport value," Stanley said. "No matter what era, water transportation is the cheapest way of transportation. The waterways formed by the many tributaries of the Congo River are golden trade routes. According to you, this should be good news, right?" Constantine asked inexplicably. "You Alright, but there is a premise that you need a huge upfront investment, and the railway from Matadi to Kinshasa is a hurdle that cannot be overcome. Stanley replied. From Matadi to Kinshasa, the railway is about 400 kilometers long. You can imagine how difficult it would be to build such a railway in Africa, far from the civilized world. No matter how difficult it is to build, the cost will be high. As for why Matadi went to Kinshasa, this is because after the ships caused by the waterfalls in the lower reaches of the Congo River reached Africa, reading www.uucanchu.com sailed inland along the Congo River as far as they could reach Matadi. The section from Matadi to Kinshasa is not navigable. Construction of a railway linking the vast network of waterways of the Congo River with the mouth of the navigable ship is an indispensable condition for the development of the Congo, continued Stanley. As for what resources Congo has, I'm not a professional scholar, and I don't know, but from the perspective of the civilization level of the local people, no matter what kind of treasure God buried in Congo, it's still buried in the ground intact, Stanley wrote. In other words, so far, I know that you and your father, His Majesty, have invested a lot of money, but with all due respect, it is not enough. You must find supporters, those who have a banker with a lot of capital, or some other dignitary. This is my sincere suggestion, Stein said, looking at Constantine. Stanley hoped that Constantine would succeed, because the balance of his remuneration had not been paid yet. That is to say, the initial investment is very expensive, but it is still very profitable. Constantine continued to ask, wanting to know the thoughts of this old African oiler. That's right. Oh, by the way, I also heard about an expedition from Tanzania recently, Stanley said. There are as many expeditions in Africa, sir. Constantine said disapprovingly. This one is different. His leader is Cameron, an Englishman. As for his patron, I have heard privately, Stanley said here, looking at Constantine, it is the King of Belgium, Leopold II. Hearing this name, Constantine's pupils shrank, and he secretly said, he's still here. Chapter 11, Leopold II. Constantine couldn't help but be surprised when he heard the name Leopold in the original time and space. It was the King of Belgium, Leopold II, who hired Stanley to explore the Congo River basin after the Berlin International Conference for the Partition of Africa in 1884. The Congo became the private domain of Leopold II. Speaking of which, Leopold and Greece are also closely related. Leopold came from the family of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha in Germany. Who was the father of Leopold II? It's Leopold I. Isn't it nonsense? Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. How prominent is this surname? Until the 21st century, the British royal family was descended from the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha family. When World War I broke out, Britain and Germany fought to the death on the battlefield as countries that are hostile to each other. Public opinion propaganda during the war naturally smears the opponent, and publicizes how righteous the enemy is and how evil the enemy is. The British looked at it and wondered why the King of England was German. No wonder. Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. It's a very German surname. During a special period like the war period, a royal family with a German surname looked awkward. Under the pressure of public opinion, the British royal family changed the surname to Windsor. The prominence of the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha family is evident when Greece became independent in 1830. The Greek people once elected Leopold I as the King of Greece, but as a noble with a long history in Europe, they did not look down on Greece, a small and poor Balkan country that had just become independent from the Ottoman Turkish rule at that time. After Belgium gained independence from the Netherlands, Leopold I was elected King of Belgium. Belgium has always been a wealthy country in Europe. It is located in the Netherlands, France and the United Kingdom. It has an important strategic position and is rich in coal and iron resources. It has completed its industrialization very early. It is not only an industrial country, but also a capital exporting country. It was still in the Republic of China. Invest in railways. Economic conditions are not comparable to Greece at all. Later, Leopold I left a huge inheritance of 15 million francs to his son Leopold II. It seems that there is a lot of money to be made in Belgium. The 15 million francs in the 19th century. How can such a huge sum of money be used effectively and make it live and flow? Which became a headache for the rich second-generation Leopold I because of excess capital in Belgium and fierce market competition. Investment returns in Belgium are too low. There is a stable interest income in the bank, but people don't like it. Belgium, which just finished its industrialization, has the same troubles as other industrial powers. We need enough cheap industrial raw materials to serve as food for industrial machines. Excess industrial production capacity needs to be found in the consumer market to vent. A Belgian state itself also has an interest in finding colonies. This guy took a large sum of money left by his father, spent money everywhere, swayed money, formed an international organization called International African Association, and at the same time instructed the newspaper to create public opinion with Leopold's support and spending money. Major countries have also established sub-associations of the International African Association in their own countries. The purpose of the international just past association is, Africans live in darkness and need European civilization to dispel ignorance, protect vulnerable African indigenous people from the cruel and evil Arab slave traders, and place Africa under the protection of European powers. Next, maintain trade activities. These words are not entirely high-sounding speeches, and they have indeed done some practical things. At the end of the 19th century, the Arabs were still engaged in the slave trade. The appeal of the International African Association is in the interest of European countries, because everyone needs a consumer market and cheap industrial raw materials. These Arabs arrested black people and swept black villages, making it impossible for Europeans to do business and grab wealth. In addition, the slave trade is indeed unpopular. Two barbaric and bloody European nations united against Arab slave traders, which eventually led to the disappearance of the slave trade in the early 20th century. Seriously speaking, when Constantine paid Stanley to explore the Congo River basin, he borrowed the power created by Leopold in order to deceive people and paralyze other countries. Constantine deliberately confused the flags of the International African Association and the Congo Commission. The Congo Council was an organization established in Greece by Constantine to persuade King George I to follow the example of Leopold II. Stanley's expeditions were all done in the name of the Congolese Commission. The great Constantine, driven by a sense of justice, resolutely devoted himself to fighting the evil forces in Africa for the happiness, stability and unity of the African people. Don't hesitate to take out a lot of money and pay for it out of your own pocket. It is such selfless devotion, no self-interest, exclusively for the African people. As for why the flags of Congo Council and International African Association are deliberately confused, the southern part of the Congo River is a Portuguese colony, Angola. People have been operating this colony since the age of navigation. The northern part of the Congo River is the sphere of influence of the French, and the French are the hegemons throughout North Africa. Just after crossing the estuary of the river into the Atlantic Ocean, there are often Portuguese and French gunboats patrolling back and forth. Had Stanley not been flying the flag of the International African Association on the ships of the Congo Commission, the French-Portuguese must have intercepted the adventurous fleet at the mouth of the Congo. Whether it is the French or the Portuguese, for the Congo River Basin, it is the old cat's pillow and salted fish, and it is bound to win. If you know that the Congolese Committee is operating under your nose, it has nothing to do with the African Association, and you will have already started. So the whole African project is a complete failure. In order to win the opportunity to contribute to the African people and not to disturb the French and Portuguese colonists, Constantine ordered that the flag of Venus and blue background be hoisted. After all, everyone has the same dream, the same world, right? It doesn't matter if you borrow it now. I suddenly heard Stanley say that a Cameron expedition supported by the Belgian King Leopold appeared in the coastal area of Tanzania in Africa, and wanted to move inland. How could it not be touched? In any case, the Cameron expedition must be stopped, otherwise it will be very troublesome in the future. Do you have any plans, Mr. Stanley? Constantine asked, looking at Stanley with the old present. Your Majesty, it's nothing more than. After speaking here, he paused for a while, and without further elaboration, Constantine raised his head in surprise and looked at Stanley. I saw Stanley, waving his right hand in the shape of a knife. Constantine was silent, thinking with his head lowered. If you just compete for financial resources, others are not necessarily inferior to yourself. Moreover, the national strength of Belgium is dwarfed by the mud in Greece. Since there is no other way, it can only take decisive measures. What do you need me to do? Constantine lowered his head, stared at the table, and tapped the table with 5 fingers in turn. Stanley was a little surprised when he heard this answer, looking at Constantine's immature appearance. Obviously, Constantine understood what his actions meant. It was only at this time that Stanley, an old fritters explorer who was accustomed to adventure in Africa, put away his contempt for Constantine, a 15-year-old child from an upper-class nobleman. After thinking about it, Stanley said, Leopold II is a rich man. The expedition he organized is not weak. If you want to start, you must have absolute certainty. You reading www.uucan'tchoo.com. If it is exposed, there will be a big Constantine. interrupted Stanley's words, stared at Stanley, and said, "You only need to say the request. What do you need me to do?" "I need the support of professional military personnel. You know, the mercenaries recruited by our expedition team are amateurs with different qualities," Stanley said. "The 500-strong Royal Guards, well equipped, part of the Royal Guard is the limit I can mobilize," Constantine said. "In addition, I'll give you another 1 million francs. As the funds for the next period of time, Banning will receive this check," Constantine said with a stern face. Banning was in charge of the finances of the Congolese Commission, had been on the African expedition, and was Constantine's confidante. He has contributed a lot to the success of the African project, and he is also the chairman of the Congolese Committee. Banning supervises the activities of the adventure team in place of Constantine. Although Constantine is the Crown Prince of Greece, he is only 15 years old after all, and is currently studying at the Athens Military Academy. The 500-person Royal Guard is the limit he can use. Constantine has already overwhelmed all the power in his hands. If this operation fails, I am afraid that all the previous efforts will be in vain. The royal family will no longer support Africa plans. Stanley was shocked by Constantine's decisiveness. He not only added 500 professional military personnel, but also took the initiative to increase the expedition funds by 1 million. For a while, Stanley was both happy and a little nervous. "I am happy that I have received the full help of Constantine, and I am worried about the consequences of not doing things well. The pressure is huge." Chapter 12. Plan ahead. Also, don't do anything until the Cameron expedition has not set foot in the Congo River Basin and confirmed that they are heading for the Congo River Basin, Constantine instructed. After saying these words, he was worried that Stanley would be self-defeating. He added, "It's still up to you to be flexible. In short, our goal is only limited to the Congo River Basin. If the Cameron expedition is only active in Tanzania, then we will not have any overstepping actions. If the next words, Constantine did not say, but he believed that Stanley understood. However, Belgium may not necessarily go to the Congo River Basin. After all, the Cameron expedition is only active in Tanzania. Tanzania is still far away from the Congo River Basin. It was only because of Leopold II's sensitive and special identity that Constantine had such a big reaction. Your Excellency, I think it's best for you to have a meeting with His Majesty King Leopold II of Belgium. If you can reach an agreement, this is the most appropriate method and the cost is the lowest. As for doing it in Africa, then it's the last resort," Stanley said. Although based on the strength of the current expedition, plus the 500 professional military personnel that Constantine promised to support, Stanley's expedition was far stronger than Cameron's team. However, taking risks in Africa is inherently risky. You need to deal with various natural and man-made disasters and other emergencies at any time, such as diseases, food shortages, and so on. If it can avoid conflicts with professional European adventure teams and reduce risks, it is more in line with Stanley's wishes. Meet with Leopold I will do it, but we can't put all our hope in Leopold's willingness to be a good boy. I will do both. As for you, we're based on a tough solution, Constantine said. Also, the arrival of the 500 military personnel of the Royal Guard, before the Cameron expedition leaks its thoughts on the Congo River, put military targets on those Arab slave traders, and teach these a lesson, Stanley said through gritted teeth. Leopold is not easy to provoke. You little dare to come to beat the autumn wind. Slave traders usually have two routes of attack. One is through the Nile River to Sudan, and then down the Nile River to the Congo River Basin. The other is to make a base camp from Zanzibar, land on the coast of Tanzania and then move inland to the Congo, Stanley said. Even because of the frequent exchanges of these slave traders, the lions in the areas on both sides of the Arab slave trade route on the east coast have a habit of cannibalism, Stanley sighed. Man-eating lions, this is too scary, Nina said, covering her mouth with her little hands after hearing such terrifying news. This is because the slave traders have to travel long distances to get back to their base camps, such as Zanzibar on the coast of the Indian Ocean, after they have caught slaves deep into the African interior. Some 6 slaves were abandoned by the slave traders on the way, or they escaped privately, but the lions are cheap, and those lions are addicted to eating people, Stanley said. I heard that lions often attack people or eat people on the east coast of Africa. It is because the slave traders frequently abandon the old, weak and sick slaves, and they develop the habit of cannibalism. Seeing Nina's response to such news, go on. The lions in East Africa will sneak into human villages and human courtyards in the dark, and suddenly take away unsuspecting children. Frightened children cry, and wait until their parents come out. The child is gone. Stanley's tone was mysterious, talking about the danger, waving his hands and making gestures, his tone elongated, teasing Nina. How can a lion be so bad? Even a child is not spared. Nina covered her mouth with her hands, stared wide-eyed, and looked terrified, which male lions especially like children, especially beautiful girls, when they lick their soft and wet tongues. The barbs on the tongue scrape the girl's delicate skin with blood, and they can even bite the bones. Unlike those adults, the bones are hard and the teeth are hard, and the meat is old and woody, and it is not delicious. As Stanley spoke, he stuck out his tongue and opened his mouth, imitating the actions he described, thinking that he was like a male lion. Hearing this, Nina ran to Constantine's side, just wrapped her arms around Constantine's arms, and said in horror, "Then I can't go to Africa." The sight in front of him made Constantine speechless for a while. He really could not have imagined that Stanley, who is in his 40s, still has a childlike innocence. Looking at Stanley, who was teasing Nina with great interest, Constantine's heart froze for a moment. By the way, I heard that Stanley is in his 40s. Because he has been adventuring in Africa all the year round, he is still unmarried and a bachelor. Maybe he likes young girls. Thinking of this, Constantine looked at the young and beautiful Nina beside him, and then looked at Stanley, who was concentrating on telling stories. It was really possible for Nina, who has stayed in the palace all the year round. There are few opportunities to communicate with the outside world, and she was born an orphan, and she lacked fatherly love in the process of growing up. As for Stanley, he has long been a person who has been rolling around in crowds for a long time. He has rich experience in life and has experienced people like Stanley. You reading www.uucan'tcom is to Nina what a magnet is to iron. Don't you have a fatal attraction to Nina? It's just that this guy is too old, in his 40s. I don't agree with this marriage. Thinking of this, Constantine shook his head. Okay, that's it for today's conversation. Constantine stood up and interrupted the chattering too. Mr. Stanley, just stay in this hotel for a while, and leave all the expenses to me. We are going back, Stanley said. Okay, Your Excellency. Stanley stood up. You don't need to send it, just have a good rest. Constantine took Nina to the lobby. The lobby manager, who was standing there, hurriedly walked over and said respectfully, "Do you need anything else? The guest in the box will stay in your hotel for a period of time to cultivate. This is my honored guest. Don't neglect me," Constantine instructed. As for the cost, I will pay for it, and I will let the housekeeper pay for it later, Constantine said. The manager held a small notebook in his left hand and a note on it in his right, and said in his mouth, "Please rest assured, Your Excellency, we will definitely satisfy your distinguished guests." In the carriage on the way home, Constantine said to Nina, who was still staring at the scenery outside the window, "Nina, after you go back, tell the housekeeper Kate that I will invite someone to hunt tomorrow, and you make him ready. Go hunting? I remember you don't like hunting," Nina said curiously with her head tilted. "I just went hunting in name. I need to exchange feelings with a few friends," Constantine replied. "By the way, let's raise some more financing," Constantine thought. Chapter 13, Spring Hunting. For European nobles, hunting used to be a stage for them to show their privileges, especially large game such as wild boar and elk. For a period of time, this was the prey that only nobles had the right to hunt. Many great nobles love hunting. For example, the grandfather of Constantine, the current King Christian IX of Denmark, likes hunting very much. Every spring and autumn, they will hunt. Constantine's grandfather and father were both kings in 1862. The Danish prince, Constantine's father, George, 18, was elected king of Greece, while Christian himself was the crown prince of Denmark at the time. This creates a bizarre spectacle where the son is the first king ahead of the father later. Christian was crowned king of Denmark, and there was a miracle of father and son being kings at the same time. In his hand, Constantine held an exquisite shotgun that was given by his grandfather when he was hunting with his grandfather Christian IX last year. The was made of painted red-brown walnut wood. Barrel, bright silver embossed intricate pattern on the back of the gun. This is a precious handcrafted double-barreled shotgun. Wearing high boots, a tight red hunting suit, and a black felt hat, he came to the yard. All I could hear was the barking of dogs in the yard. 30 hounds of various colors and patterns gathered, and the reins were pulled by a servant in hunting clothes. Probably seeing the arrival of Constantine, the dogs wagged their tails vigorously, barked loudly wong wong, and struggled in the direction of Constantine. 30 sturdy hounds worked together, and the servant gritted his teeth and tried to control the emotional hounds, and pulled the reins hard. His face flushed. Constantine came to the hound and stroked the dogs' heads in turn. The petted hound stretched out his head, squinted his eyes, and looked in enjoyment at the same time. There were words in his mouth. "Good boy, how are you?" These hounds were usually kept in the dog pens in the manor, and Constantine would go to feed these hounds when he was free. Therefore, these hounds were closely related to Constantine, and Constantine occasionally trained these hounds how to chase their prey. The Tatoi Palace covers an area of 4,500 hectares and is located on the mountainside in the north of Athens, surrounded by forests and grasslands, making it a good hunting ground. Constantine crouched down to greet the dogs one by one, and asked the housekeeper Cape beside him, "Butler Cape, is the guest I invited here, butler?" Cape glanced at the watch on his wrist and replied, "Your Excellency, they will be here soon. Last night, I heard that Constantine was going to invite several guests to the manor for a spring hunting event." Butler Cape had hurriedly sent an invitation letter to the invited guests' mansion. "Constantine, good morning." Suddenly, Nina's voice came. Constantine turned around and saw that Nina was wearing a black hunting suit and a black felt hat, riding on the back of a white horse. "But it's the attire of a heroic huntress. Who doesn't want to be a man?" Constantine said. "Nina, are you going hunting too?" "I saw Nina on horseback," excitedly said. "How can I miss such a good outing season?" Nina has a special status. Although she is nominally Constantine's maid, she is supported by Miss Avrala, and she is deeply liked by Queen Olga. It is more like an aristocrat who is a guest at the court. At this moment, there was a commotion, and it seemed that the guests had arrived. I saw a few young people riding horses, armed with shotguns, followed by a few carriages, followed by servants. Constantine stepped forward to meet him, and several young men dismounted, bowed and saluted. "Welcome to the Tatoi Palace as a guest." Constantine stepped forward and hugged the leading young man. "This person is called Gian Goldberry, and the Goldberry family is one of the founders of the National Bank of Greece, and has always had a stake in this bank since then. The National Bank of Greece is now the largest bank in Greece, and it is also the currency of Greece, the issuing bank of Delamark, and controls the right to issue currency in Greece." "Hello, George Steve, long time no see." Constantine hugged a young man with a high nose and blue eyes. "Thank you for your invitation, Your Highness. It is an honor to be a guest at Tatoi Palace," Steve complimented. "Thank you," George replied. In 1841, Swiss bankers Gian Goldberry, Indiana and George Steff founded the National Bank of Greece. Although this bank sounds like a government central bank, it is a private bank in its entirety that has always controlled Greece's currency issuance. Gian Goldberry, Indiana and George Steve are the grandfathers of the two young men, respectively, who control the largest bank in Greece. "Hello, Coster Bloom," Constantine greeted as he embraced the third young man. "Hello, Your Highness, it is a great honor to receive your invitation," Coster Bloom replied. The Kosterblow family is the owner of the Greek Alpha Bank, which has been in control since the bank was established in 1879. There are some other children from wealthy families, but these three are the ones that Constantine paid more attention to. In the carriage behind, several wealthy girls dressed in gorgeous long skirts came to Constantine, pulled the sides of the skirts with their hands, and bowed to perform court etiquette. "Welcome to Tatoi Palace, beautiful ladies. I hope you have a good time." Constantine agreed. In other European countries, most of the people invited by Constantine should be the sons of nobles, but Greece is a special case. Greece, which had just gained independence from the Ottoman Turks in 1830, had a short period of independence, only a few decades. Also, King Otto before George I was deposed by the Greeks. This leads to a special situation in Greece. Apart from the royal family and a few nobles from the royal family, there are no other nobles at all. So there is today's scene. The guests are all from merchant families. "Okay, the guests are all here, we can go." Constantine raised his voice and felt aloud. The young lads got on their horses, and the rich ladies were wearing long skirts, so they couldn't ride a horse, so they had to get into the carriage. The European upper class in the 19th century regarded hunting as a rare opportunity to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city and get close to nature. Therefore, it was all the rage in the upper class, and Constantine was still looking forward to it. The servant let go of the reins that bound a hound. The hounds ran quickly to Constantine's purplish-red horse, crowded around, squatting on the ground with their heads raised, watching Constantine, and barking at him non-stop. The jujube horse carries a package on its back, which contains the tools that may be used in the hunting process. Tools include binoculars, dog whistle, daggers large and small, medical bandages, matches, poncho, compass, Plenty of food and water. Constantine, riding on a purplish-red horse, took the lead, led the horse team, and walked out of the gate, followed by the hounds behind the horse. Seeing this, Nina quickly followed the crowd, went to the hunting ground in a mighty manner. Chapter 14, Prey. Steve's men drove ahead on horseback, and the ladies walked slowly in the carriage. The purplish-red horse under the seat of Constantine has well-proportioned skeletal muscle development, strong posture, graceful posture, and abnormal horses. The burgundy fur, well cared for and well nourished, shiny and smooth to the touch, was a very beautiful mare, and Constantine named her Helen. It means as beautiful as Helen, the peerless beauty. In Greek historical legends, Helen is a foal that Constantine personally selected from the young horses in the manor, and with the help of Mav Kafka, feeds the big foal. Helen, who is just 5 years old this year, is when she is active and active. Compared with a horse, 5 years old is when she is physically strong. She was probably suffocated in the horse pen. Helen was so excited since she went out, she kept sneezing and seemed to be dissatisfied with Constantine's slow movements. She was always eager to try and restless. Constantine, who is riding on a horse, could only lean forward and stroke Helen's head for comfort because they have to take care of the ladies in the carriage behind. Even the men who are riding on horses have a tacit control over the speed of their mounts, so as not to pull down the carriage too far. The only exception was Nina. Nina, riding a white horse, surrounded by a group of hounds, trotted all the way, pulling everyone down a short distance. It is the spring season in April. The forest that has been silent for a winter has ushered in a new time of vitality. The boundary around Tatoi Palace has sparse woods and open grasslands, which are suitable for hunting activities, so everyone can experience the fun of hunting activities without having to go far. The carriage team stopped on an open green grass, and the ladies in the carriage slowly walked down. The accompanying servants removed the accompanying items in the carriage, tables and chairs for resting in the wild, lay a white tablecloth on the table, arranged the tea sets in order, and then put coffee, tea, snacks, and drinks. The essential condiment for tea, sugar, is taken out and placed on the table, so that it can be readily available to everyone. The ladies sat under chairs under umbrellas and chatted eagerly with each other. Constantine listened, and it was all about women. Which store had beautiful clothes on the shelves and bought them on a trip to Paris? What fashionable clothing, what kind of dress is more fashionable? Constantine quickly lost interest, seeing that the ladies have been settled. For them, this hunting activity is more like a spring outing, with one exception. Nina, who is wearing a black hunting suit and a felt hat, sat on the ladies' seat, out of tune with a group of ladies in brightly colored long dresses. Nina, who has always lived in the palace, is at a loss for the hobbies of these pairs. The ladies have heated discussions about their opinions. Nina can't join in at all. Nina, come with us and hunt on horseback. Your outfit is totally unsuitable for sitting here. Constantine couldn't bear it, so he could only relieve Nina. Nina, who was at a loss, heard Constantine's invitation and readily accepted. Many men drove the horses and gathered together. The hounds ran around under the horses, and Constantine picked up the horn that had fallen on his body, and blew a low and penetrating horn sound. Towards the distance spread a dozen men and horses, galloping on their horses, the hounds flying with their hooves, made their way in front of the hunter team. The figures of the team slowly sank into the depths of the grassy forest and disappeared from everyone's sight. Constantine carefully controlled Helen's reins over the stream and the palisade of vines and bushes that stood in front of him. Well done, Helen, that's it. Constantine, sitting on Helen's back, would praise her once every time Helen crossed the obstacle. Whenever she stepped over an obstacle, Helen would be able to have fun, galloping on the flat and open grass, and Constantine would no longer restrain her. A trained hunting dog, with a sharp nose and agile movements, is a good helper for hunters. They are responsible for assisting hunters with their ears and noses. The group of running hounds suddenly accelerated, barked wildly, and became restless. His Royal Highness, it looks like the hounds have found some prey. Goldberry came to Helen's side and said to Constantine, "Yes, what kind of prey is it?" Constantine agreed. "I saw the hounds running aggressively towards a cluster of bushes just as he was about to approach. A red figure quickly fled into the distance, with bright red fur, pointed ears, and a body that was one size lower than the hounds. Haha, it's a red fox," Constantine said excitedly. Constantine excitedly picked up the horn in front of him and blew it again. Many hunters who heard the horn knew that this was an encounter with their prey. He drove the horses that were sitting down, and everyone accelerated towards the direction of the hounds. One of the important prey in hunting activities, the red fox, is mainly tracked by the nose of the hound. The greatest joy of hunting foxes is the chasing process. Red foxes usually come out to hunt for food in the morning and evening. Once they find the hounds, they will become very alert and start their own escape journey. The alert red fox is good at hiding its tracks, but its scent is hard to hide among the hounds as a foxhound. Foxhounds are specially trained to track by smell and can keep up with the scent of red foxes. Foxhounds don't walk very fast, and sometimes lose the prey, and the lucky red fox can continue to enjoy a free life. I wonder if this red fox is so lucky today. The appearance of the red fox made many hunters excited, and they kept calling for the horses that were sitting down, moving in the direction of the fox. This fox is very cunning and knows how to use its own intelligence. It is smaller than the hounds. Whenever the hounds will catch up, it turns back into the dense bushes. Hounds are bigger and less nimble than foxes, so they are not good at this kind of hide and seek. Every time the figure of the red fox disappeared, the hounds stretched their necks and sniffed the ground diligently. www.uucan'tchoo.com relied on the scent to find her again, and indicated to the hunters such as Constantine where the prey was during the chase. Helen and Constantine cooperated tacitly. Helen was trained, level-headed, and brave. The terrain in the jungle is complicated, and Constantine carefully controlled Helen, crossing the bushes, crossing the flowing water, and closely following the group of hounds ahead. I saw the hounds in front of them. They stopped and barked around a clearing. Constantine and the other hunters dismounted and went to the hounds. They saw a cave in the ground. There was no doubt that the red fox had escaped into the cave. The larger hounds barked wildly around the cave unwillingly. What should I do now, everyone? Coster Bloom, this is the first time I have participated in this kind of hunting activity, and I really don't know what to do when the prey gets into the hole. Nina also looked at Constantine with a confused expression. It's okay, but it's not that easy to escape. Steve also likes to participate in hunting activities, and he is no stranger to hunting. I saw Constantine came to the side of a smaller hound that was about the same size as a red fox, and bent down and picked him up. It's time for the little man to show his skills, Constantine said. I saw Constantine holding the beagle in one hand, stroking the dog back and forth with the other, and then sending it to the cave. The beagle stood facing the cave, looking at Constantine with his head tilted, wagging his tail constantly. Go and catch that sly fox, boy. Constantine looked at the beagle and pointed to the cave. I saw that the beagle seemed to really understand, standing in front of the cave, lying low, constantly adjusting his body, and slowly burrowing into the cave. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15, Unexpected Prey. After the beagle entered the cave, there was no movement at first. After a while, there was an intense and rapid chirp sound from the cave, accompanied by the barking of the hound. Immediately afterwards, a red fox suddenly emerged from the cave, and the surrounding hounds saw this scene, and without waiting for the hunter's orders, they rushed forward quickly to encircle the fox. One of the white and brown hounds became the lucky one, grabbed the red fox in one bite, ran to Constantine, held his head high, and proudly presented the result of the battle to the hunter. Good job, mate, Constantine praised without hesitation, squatted down, stroked Lucky's head with his left hand, stretched out his right hand, and took the prey from his mouth. Then he stood up, held up the prey in his right hand, and showed it to everyone. The hunters cheered loudly, and the fox hunting operation was a complete success, successfully catching the red fox. After a while, the beagle that got into the hole, wagging its tail, walked up to Constantine and barked wang wang at Constantine. Don't worry, I know that you also have credit, and you are a reward. Constantine bent down and stroked and comforted the beagle. Should we reward these hunters who have made great contributions, guys? Constantine looked around at the hunters and asked. Of course, Your Excellency, Goldberry replied. Yes, for making a contribution, you will naturally be rewarded. Yes, there was a sound of agreement all around. Constantine handed the prey in his hand to Nina, who reached out and found it. Then he squatted down between two hounds, one big and one small, and stroked their heads. Yes, you have made a contribution, and of course you have to reward it, Constantine said solemnly. This statement seemed to be admiring the hound, but when he spoke, he looked at the invited guests around him meaningfully. Follow them. Galby, Rui and Steve looked at each other with different expressions. Standing up, Constantine opened the package on Helen's body, took out a piece of red pork sausage, held a dagger in his right hand, cut the sausage into pieces, and placed them in front of the big and small hounds. The two hounds feasted and ate with relish. The hounds around, barking, squatting or lying down, looked up enviously and watched them enjoy the food. Those who don't make contributions naturally have no chance to get rewards. These words seem to warn the other hounds around them to give up their unrealistic delusions. Are you right? Constantine asked the surrounding guests for their opinions. The invited guests were not from simple families, and most of them could hear what Constantine meant. Of course, Your Excellency the Duke, those who have not made contributions do not deserve to be rewarded, Kosterblum replied. In the crowd the others remained silent. Steve and Gaubert looked at each other. Gaubert shook his head when everyone saw Steve and Goldberry. They didn't respond, so they pretended to be deaf and dumb, just pretending they didn't understand. Constantine took in all the reactions of the crowd inside in his heart, knowing that things would not go so smoothly as for Kosterblum's reaction. It was also expected by Constantine. Alpha Bank is not as rich and deep-rooted as the National Bank of Greece. This bank has only been established for 3 or 4 years, and its business has just begun to develop. It is eager to open up the situation. What is more powerful than the combination of money and power? The National Bank of Greece is different. This is a bank with decades of history. It does not want to be as eager as Alpha Bank. Anyway, they hold the right to issue currency, and they will always have a share of their own interests. They all heard about Constantine's actions in Africa, although not on detail. Constantine never revealed his ambitions in public. Therefore, the African plan has been carried out secretly and quietly, only doing it but not talking about it. When it is a fait accompli and the countries coveting the Congo cannot stop it, it will not matter. They still have doubts in their hearts. In their eyes, Greece, a small European country, wants to grab a colony in Africa, surrounded by wolves. In their eyes, it is too whimsical. In their eyes, I am afraid that they regard the 15-year-old Constantine's plan as a game of urchins. Although he had expected it, Constantine still felt a suffocation when he saw the scene in front of him. But it wasn't that it didn't come to fruition at all. It was somewhat unexpected that Kosterblum was able to express his attitude in such a straightforward manner. But if you think about the current situation of Alpha Bank, it can be understood they probably just felt that the goods were rare, and they probably didn't pay much attention to Constantine's African plan in their hearts. More than that, I just want to take this opportunity to go online with the royal tower of the Greek palace and gain political benefits. The drunkard's intention is not to drink, but it doesn't matter. What they want is political support. What Constantine desperately needs is economic support. Well, gentlemen, let's rest for a while. Constantine said the hunting activity has come to an end. You reading www.uucan't's previous pursuit of red foxes, whether it was a horse or a hound, was very exhausting, and the hunters were also very tired hearing Constantine's words. The servants who accompanied him on horseback took down the stalls they were carrying and spread them on the flat ground for everyone to rest. Then he led the horse and tied it in the nearby woods to recover his strength. Constantine, who was resting on the blanket, took the water bottle that Nina handed over and took 2 sips. Lying on the blanket, watching the white clouds in the sky gather and disperse, the blue skies like a large piece of pure and flawless blue gem. Take a deep breath. The fresh fragrance of grass, wood and soil fills my chest in a relaxed and leisurely rest time. It seems that all thoughts have been dispelled at this moment. Unconsciously, he completely relaxed, and Constantine, who narrowed his eyes, took a nap. Nina held a piece of grass in her hand that was folded from nowhere, and quietly handed it to Constantine's nose, giggling and tickling. Ah! Constantine rubbed his sore nose and snatched the grass from Nina's hand impatiently, but when he saw the shape of the grass in his hand, he was stunned. The grass stem is straight, the upper part is multi-branched, and the small leaves are finely divided, showing an arrow-like shape. A sense of familiarity came to my mind. Where have you seen this thing? Nina saw Constantine staring blankly at the grass in his hand, motionless, frowning, confused, wondering what happened to Constantine in the past. She used to play with Constantine, but she had never seen Constantine like this. Constantine, who was holding green grass in his hand, looked at him and felt very familiar, but it was the green grass that could not be called by name. Contemplative. What is the name of this grass? Chapter 16, Kosterblum. Constantine observed the grass in his hands and remembered the scene of his meeting with Stanley before. At that time, Stanley complained that Europeans in southern Africa were not adapted to the local climate, and people often got sick, such as malaria, dysentery and other diseases are very common. When it was Constantine, he also thought that although cinchona bark can treat malaria, the side effects are very serious. Unfortunately, artemisinin was only invented after World War II. Thinking of this, I took a look at the green grass in my hand again. I was ecstatic. I finally understood the source of the familiarity. Isn't this Artemisia annua? In the previous life, Huaxia won a Nobel Prize for the invention of artemisinin. At that time, the media public opinion was in a climax, and the significance of artemisinin was reported in turn at that time. Out of curiosity, I personally searched for some pictures of Artemisia annua on the internet to watch. When talking with Stanley, I remembered Artemisia annua, so I felt familiar when I saw Artemisia annua here. Constantine kicked a carp, stood up from the blanket, walked quickly to Nina, and asked eagerly, "Where did you get this grass?" As he spoke, he handed the half-branch of Artemisia annua in his hand to Nina. Nina didn't understand the situation for a while, and asked in confusion, "What grass, Constantine?" Shook the half-branch of Artemisia annua in his hand and said, "It's the grass in my hand. Where did you get it from?" Although the doubtful Nina was full of doubts, she only saw Constantine's firm attitude, so she took Constantine to a small river not far from the rest camp, pointed to the beach and said, "That's it." Constantine quickly walked closer to check, and sure enough, the large green weeds on the beach were not Artemisia annua. Constantine was overjoyed. This was an unexpected prey. In his previous life, Constantine also deliberately checked the information on artemisinin. He remembered that a single medicine can directly treat malaria. The prescription recorded by Jerhong more than 1,000 years ago, a grasp of artemisinin, soaked in 2 liters of water, squeeze the juice and take it. To put it bluntly, this is the thing to treat malaria. Just soak it in water, squeeze out the juice and take it. Malaria is a disease caused by the Plasmodium parasite, which can be transmitted by mosquitoes. This disease spread very widely before the advent of the special drug quinine. For example, in ancient China, books describe the land of Lingnan as the land of miasma. Jiangnan is poor and wet, and her husband died early. This is a phrase describing Jiangnan. Needless to say, the reason for this claim is almost certainly due to the role of malaria. The disease once protected the African interior from European invasion and became a stumbling block for European colonists. The landmark meeting for Europeans to carve up Africa was the Berlin Conference in 1884, which officially opened the horn for the European colonial powers to carve up Africa. For example, Germany got German East Africa, Tanzania, and Namibia after this meeting, and sent officials to the colonies to maintain its rule. Seeing this, people will be very puzzled. Why is it so late? You must know that the era of great voyages began around 1500. After that, the Portuguese and Spaniards occupied colonies all over the world. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Britain and France occupied large tracts of colonies such as India and North America. So why did European talent start to carve up Africa in 1884? After all, is there any other place in the world that is as close to Europe as Africa? For example, the Americas, whether in South America or North America, have a large number of descendants of Europeans, but in Southern Africa there are very few descendants of Europeans, and only South Africa and Namibia have a small number of white Europeans living. The answer is malaria. A popular remedy for malaria is quinine, which is extracted from the bark of the cinchona tree. At first, some missionaries saw that the indigenous people used cinchona bark to treat pendulum malaria, and they also imitated them to eat cinchona bark, which was later confirmed to be effective. It is precisely because of the emergence of quinine that it became possible for Europe to divide Africa. It's just that the cinchona tree has strict requirements on the growth environment and can only be grown in subtropical regions. In terms of materials, it is definitely not as convenient as the widely distributed Artemisia annua. Of course, Constantine still has a long way to go if he wants to make money by selling it as a drug. Not to mention, if Constantine shouted loudly that Artemisia annua could cure malaria, everyone would definitely not be stingy with praise, and they would sincerely praise the good news that Constantine's discovery brought to patients. As for making money, just think about it. After that, it has nothing to do with Constantine. Countries like Britain, France, Germany, and the United States really don't care much about the patent rights of a little Greek prince. In the face of huge profits, there is nothing wrong with infringing on someone else's patent. Accidentally discovered a medicinal material, which made Constantine less interested in hunting. Afterward, the guests invited by Constantine had their own harvests in the subsequent hunting activities. Seeing that the host, Constantine, had changed his enthusiasm in the morning and lacked interest, naturally he would not reluctantly end the hunting activities in a hurry. Castebro, who hurried back home from the hunting activities in the Tatoi Palace, walked into the living room full of exhaustion, took off his tight hunting clothes, and sat relaxed on the sofa. Perhaps the servant forgot to light the candle. Coster Bloom, who was sitting on the sofa, thought that the light in the room was dim. "How about it?" the sudden voice surprised Coster Bloom, squinting his eyes to adjust in the darkness in the living room. and after a while, he arrived at a position facing the garden in the living room. On a chair, a middle-aged man was lying. It was his father, the founder of Alpha Bank. "John, oh, today's hunting was okay. Did I hide a deer?" Kosterblum thought his father was asking about his hunting performance. "I'm talking about which prince. How is it? Is it worth the effort to make friends?" "Father asked you if you want to be a successful banker. How can you succeed if you can't make friends widely? Not only to make friends, but also to make friends with vast energy." Thinking of his father's teachings in the past, Kosterblum recalled the performance of Prince Constantine during the day. "He's a very shrewd person, just a little whimsical," Kosterblum said when he thought of the African plan, "but I still listened to your wishes, father, and expressed kindness." Kosterblum replied, "Did he make any request today?" "No." "Do you think his African plan has any chance of success?" Kosterblum felt his father questioning himself. "An unrealistic idea," Kosterblum replied. "I heard that the prince has mobilized the royal guard. Do you understand?" John asked after meeting with Stanley. Constantine just informed the guards that there would be a task for them in the near future to prepare them. "If you want to inherit the family business in the future, you'd better be better informed." John frowned and looked at Kosterblum. "What? Do you think the prince mobilized the guards, but the king didn't stop it?" John continued to ask. Kosterblum was already sweating on his forehead. He racked his brains and didn't want to make a fool of himself in front of his father, but he really couldn't think of a reasonable reason. "I don't know if you are really stupid or lacking experience, hey." John was a little disappointed when he saw his son's questioning and ignorance. "His Majesty the King didn't stop it. That shows his attitude. He supports it," John said earnestly and guided. "Yes, the king supports it," said Kosterblum. "Then I think that His Majesty the King has been in power for about 20 years, and his political ability is not bad if he supports it. It means that Constantine's plan is indeed possible." Looking at Kosterblum, who suddenly realized, John nodded. "Tomorrow, you will go to the Tatoy Palace to contact Constantine and get him a check for 500,000 British pounds, saying that the Kosterblum family supports his African plan." Hearing the huge figure of 500,000 British pounds, Kosterblum was taken aback and looked at his father in disbelief. "Well, then we spend 500,000 pounds. What's the requirement?" Kosterblum said. "You don't need to say anything. Prince Constantine naturally understands. Even if he doesn't understand, His Majesty the King will understand. That's enough." After saying these words, John seems to have lost interest in continuing the conversation, and the room has returned to silence. Only Kosterblum was still carefully pondering what his father had just said. Chapter 17, Great Value Drug. With a bundle of artemisia and Newell brought back from the hunting grounds, Constantine came to the study to ponder the chemistry knowledge of junior high school. Carefully, artemisinin is an organic substance. Since it is an organic substance, it is easily soluble in organic solutions. This is the principle of extracting artemisinin. The reason why Constantine was so eager to make artemisinin was not that he was eager to sell artemisinin to make money. It was the 500 members of the royal guard, who were ready to go to Africa after Constantine's order. Constantine just wanted to minimize non-combat attrition. In southern Africa, where the environment is harsh, hot and rainy, and mosquito-infested, the threat of disease to combatants may be far greater than other factors, so it ranks first. Clash of the Cameron expeditions. Artemisia annua, which can cure malaria, was one of the supplies that Constantine prepared for his guards. As for why the cinchona bark is not used and artemisinin is used so much, the reasons are complicated. The first reason, and nothing else, is the high price. Cinchona bark is native to the Andes Mountains in the South American continent. Since its inception, the price has remained high, and countless people have flocked to it. The emergence of every kind of special medicine is a carnival of capital. To put it bluntly, there are countless people who use special drugs to become rich. Cinchona bark is no exception because the demand for cinchona trees is huge. The wild species cannot withstand human exploitation, and the number is getting smaller and smaller. Cinchona tree is a very delicate and picky tree species. If the environment is not suitable, even if it can be transplanted successfully, the content of active ingredients, quinine, will be very low. The British government made several attempts, but the cinchona tree planted had no medicinal value at all, and finally gave up. The Dutch came to Java, where the climate conditions are similar to the Andes, and it took 30 years to successfully plant the medicinal cinchona tree. The Dutch have put in so much energy and money, but they are not doing good deeds, and in the end they have to earn double from the cinchona bark. The success of this planting has directly allowed the Dutch to control the world market of quinine, Extract of cinchona bark, treatment of malaria. For nearly 100 years, seeing that the Dutch made a lot of money with quinine, the jealous British were unwilling to fail, so they tried again to plant cinchona trees in India. The planting was successful, but the active ingredient content of quinine is low, and the international market does not recognize it at all. The British, who were forced to do so, could only sell in India. The result is that 2 million people die each year from malaria in India, a very stable number. The Dutch controlled the raw material market, and in order to obtain higher economic benefits, they controlled its price with an iron fist. Every time the price of cinchona bark in the international market drops, they destroy some cinchona trees. The U.S. Department of Justice once accused the Dutch of violating U.S. antitrust laws and confiscated 5 tons of Dutch cinchona bark in New York. The Dutch control of cinchona bark is evidenced. A second reason is the serious side effects cinchona bark. This herb, when it is ineffective, it is not clear whether the dose is not enough or the ingredients of the raw materials are wrong. If you take too much, the side effects will be very serious. These include tinnitus, deafness, diarrhea, headaches, visual disturbances, and, in severe cases, death. Therefore, the trouble is more troublesome. Besides, after making it successfully, you can still master a fortune, and you can make a lot of money. How can you ignore the opportunity to make a fortune? Like the Dutch Constantine asked his servants to mash the washed Artemisia annua, and then took 4 bottles of high liquor vodka, soaked the Artemisia crumbs, and after 2 days, filtered the residue with gauze to get bottled green Artemisia, a mixture of juice and alcohol. Those who have received 9 years of compulsory education are excellent. Constantine exclaimed, knowledge is money. As for the efficacy of the medicine, this is a little troublesome. Whether the Artemisia annua prepared by this method is effective or not will only be known after testing. The next morning after the successful preparation, Constantine came to the Athens City Hospital with the homemade artemisinin. In the Athens City Hospital, even the patients of the royal family come here to seek medical treatment for general illnesses. It is the best hospital in Greece. It receives a large number of patients every day, and there must be malaria patients. Athens City Hospital, Dean Philip's office. You said you invented a new drug to treat malaria. After hearing Constantine's intention, Dean Philip, who wore gold glasses, was full of suspicion. Your Excellency Duke, I want to solemnly remind you that medicine is very serious, and it is not something that is willful. It concerns people's lives, Dean Philip said solemnly. President Philip, I understand the truth. You can help me and conduct a drug test. If it doesn't work, I apologize to you. After struggling for a long time, Dean Philip firmly disagreed and conducted a drug experiment of artemisinin. Constantine was also very helpless. He didn't know whether to praise Philip for his due diligence or scold him for being stubborn. There is no other way but to use the lure. As long as you help me do this drug experiment, I will help you get the body of the Athens prison. How about that? Constantine, who didn't want to be entangled with this old stubborn, used his trump card. I don't believe that. After listening to this condition, you still don't agree. Sure enough, after hearing about Constantine's conditions, Philip looked at Constantine in surprise, his gray beard shaking continuously. The 19th century was a period of rapid progress in European medicine. Doctors were a special profession with strong practicality. The more examples they came into contact with, the stronger the professional abilities. The medical level of the 19th century developed very rapidly, especially surgery. The development of surgery has saved many lives, and the advancement of surgical knowledge largely depends on the development of anatomy. Anatomy is a specialized subject that pays great attention to summarizing experience from practice. Reading www.uucan'tchoo.com. The practice mentioned here is to do indescribable things to the corpse. However, due to the constraints of social ethics and morality, it is unacceptable for the public, especially religious people, to dissect corpses in an open and fair manner. It's not just the Easterners who are taboo against the dead, but the Westerners too. And if medicine wants to progress, it must come into contact with a large number of corpses. The medical world needs a large number of surgeons, but the materials necessary to train surgeons are far from enough. A huge contradiction has emerged. The number of corpses obtained legally is far from enough for medical professionals, and so a black market emerged. You read that right. There is not only a black market for arms, drugs and oil in this world, but also a black market for buying and selling corpses. Since it is a black market, it is not regulated by the government. As long as the corpses can be obtained, all means will be spared. So what are the sources of the corpses traded in the black market? There are 3 main types. 1. Unclaimed corpses of poor people in hospitals, workhouses and prisons. 2. Tomb robbing and digging graves. 3. Directly kill more corpses. These methods are based on how wicked they are, but there is no way. If someone buys, someone sells it. If there is demand, there are desperate people. If there is no sale, there will be no killing. Many experienced doctors and medical school teachers have obtained the goods, and with just a glance, they can roughly identify where these corpses came from the body surface. It's just that everyone turned a blind eye, pretending they didn't know. Constantine looked at Dr. Philip, who was very touched. This is called doing what you like. I'm not afraid that you won't follow. Chapter 18, Marriage. Constantine's proposal made Dean Philip unable to refuse. It has to be said that for the doctor, the corpse is really tempting because of professional habits, driven by the thirst for knowledge. Before the Renaissance, I don't know how many doctors were judged by the church in the name of heresy and burned to death because of their bad habit of dissecting corpses. Now Constantine promised to help contact the Athens prison and provide the bodies of prisoners in the Athens city hospital, which made Philip very moved. Looking at Philip sitting in the office chair, lost in thought, Constantine was not in a hurry to urge. After a long time, Philip finally had a reaction. Your Excellency, can you tell me the source of your medicine? You said it has the effect of treating malaria. Can you tell me how you learned about it? Philip asked. Seeing that Philip's attitude had loosened, Constantine naturally wanted to strike while the iron was hot. It's just that Constantine couldn't say that artemisinin was a special medicine for malaria from later generations. In order to add some persuasion, we can only make up a plausible and possible story. It's like this. I heard a sailor who used to be on the eastern route say that a Chinese doctor once used a herbal medicine to treat malaria, and it was very effective. This is actually a statement compiled by Constantine, based on the story of the American cinchona bark being seen by missionaries as being able to cure malaria. However, after Philip heard this statement, he finally did not resist. As before thinking of the origin of quinine, Philip also felt that the claim that the green liquid in Constantine's hand could cure malaria was not entirely impossible in Philip's eyes. This story finally made Constantine's behavior less absurd. I can help you verify the effect of this herb, but you have to help our hospital get the corpses of prisoners in Athens prison. I know the warden of the Athens prison. That's no problem. Constantine readily agreed. Philip took the glass bottle in Constantine's hand, looked at the green liquid in it, opened it and smelled it. The strong alcohol smell made him frown. You used ethanol to extract a certain herbal medicine. This glass bottle is a mixture of a drug and ethanol, right? As expected of a professional. Even though he just glanced at it, Philip had already guessed something immediately afterwards. Constantine stated his operational experience to Philip. Of course, the key Artemisia annua is replaced with some kind of herb. Although this Philip was not like a greedy and cunning man, Constantine did not want to experiment with the philosophical question of which money or morality is more reliable. Seeing this, Philip felt even more confident. Although Constantine's experimental request was a bit abrupt, at least it did not violate scientific common sense. In this way, we will heat it. The boiling point of ethanol is low. After heating, it evaporates, and the herbal ingredients in it will be precipitated, and then we can get the medicine you mentioned. Is this idea no problem? Philip asked. No problem, that's the way of thinking. Constantine nodded in agreement. Then, what are the side effects of a single patient's dosage? Does His Excellency the Duke have any advice on these key issues? What did the Eastern sailor have to say? Philip asked with a serious face. As far as I know, this herb has no serious side effects, and may have mild nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, etc. Constantine recalled the information about artemisinin in his mind and returned. As for the dose, I don't know that, otherwise I wouldn't use you to test it. Based on Constantine's answer, Philip pondered for a long time and said, if the experiment goes well, the whole process of the experiment will be divided into 3 steps. In the first step, 8 mild malaria patients will be subjected to a control experiment, 2 taking quinine and 2 taking quinine. For the experimental drug, 4 people are used as a control observation, and no drugs are taken for the time being. If there is no effect, the subsequent experiments will not be carried out. How about it? The first step of the experiment is to observe whether the drug is effective or not. For the safety of patients, only malaria patients with mild symptoms can be selected. Constantine agreed to the experimental method, and Dean Philip chose several doctors as assistants to prepare for the experiment. Returning to the Tatoi Palace, Constantine, who was waiting for the news of the experiment, saw Butler Capet coming to report the news. Your Excellency, during your absence, Little Kosterbloom from Alpha Bank came over and sent a check. With that, Caput handed a check in his hand to Constantine. Seeing the figure of 500,000 British pounds on the check, I sighed that the richest person is still a banker. Did he make any request? Constantine asked. No, I just said that I would support your African adventure, and then I left, and said I would come back to see His Excellency the Duke another day. Butler Caput said with a puzzled face. Hearing this, Constantine admired the Kosterbloom family's words and deeds, their extraordinary courage. Such a huge sum of 500,000 pounds, they were given as much as they were told, not even a request was made, and they were not afraid of being lost. I see. Is there anything else? His Majesty the King and Queen are waiting for you in the living room now, said Butler Caput. After hearing the news, Constantine came to the living room in the Tatoi Palace, and saw Queen Olga and King George sitting on the sofa chatting. How was the hunt yesterday? Did you catch any prey? Queen Olga asked Constantine with concern. Of course, everyone had a good time when they caught a red fox. That's really good news, Olga said. After hearing this, having said that, he glanced at his husband George and nodded towards him. Constantine, you have completed your studies at the Athens Military Academy. I have discussed with your mother and plan to let you study political science at Heidelberg or Leipzig University in Germany, and command the army officers. You know, the Germans, the schools are still very good, especially their army officer education, George. I observed Constantine's reaction, and when he saw that he had no objection, he was relieved, and, speaking of this, he pondered for a long time. Seeing her husband's hesitation, she still seemed a little hesitant, but Constantine's mother, Queen Olga, took over and continued, you are almost of age, Constantine, it's time to think about your marriage event. You should be very clear that the Greek people have high expectations for you. As the Crown Prince of Greece, you will become the king of the Greeks in the future, not an ordinary person, so your marriage will also receive special attention. Constantine was very surprised when he heard this. He didn't expect that the Queen and the King weren't already thinking about his marriage. European royal families have the habit of intermarriage with each other. Almost all royal families are related to each other, and political marriage is prevalent. The marriage of the royal family is not only a personal matter, it is also closely related to the national interest, which determines that the national interest must be considered behind the marriage of the royal family. Chapter 19, Political Marriage. Speaking of political marriage, isn't this couple in front of you a ready-made example? Constantine's mother, Grand Duchess Olga, came from the Romanov royal family of Tsarist Russia. George himself came from the Danish royal family and was the Greek king chosen by the British. The Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Luxembourg dynasty of the Greek royal family established by George and Grand Duchess Olga was naturally supported by Russia and Britain. The political gains from this political marriage are by no means empty safeguards for the blood and glory of the royal family or nobles, but are supported by real interests. For example, in order to show goodwill, in 1862, while escorting the new King George I of Greece to take office in Greece, the United Kingdom also returned the Ionian Islands in the Adriatic Sea near Greece. Constantine understood that Queen Olga meant that she hoped that when she went to study in Germany, she would pay attention to the candidates for her daughter-in-law, who would be of great benefit to her future career. For Greece, whose national strength is now weak, the political and economic benefits brought by the crown prince marrying a queen from a powerful family cannot be underestimated. For example, the famous Habsburg family, dubbed the lower half of the castle, used the means of marriage to rule over a large area of Europe. The Habsburg family has a famous saying, "Let them go to war, we just need to get married." Other countries have empires first, and then emperors, and the Habsburg family had the emperor first, and then the empire. The fortune of the Habsburg family has set a model for the European aristocracy, showing them how huge benefits can be brought through the means of aristocratic marriage. The reason why Queen Olga brought up the issue of Constantine's marriage is that Germany is a country with very special national conditions. In 1871, after defeating the French in the Franco-Prussian War, Prussia unified Germany, and with the unforgettable humiliation of the French, it added infinite glory to the German crown and became the most powerful country in Europe. However, Germany is not completely unified, and there are several small kingdoms in the country, such as Bavaria and Saxony. Although these small kingdoms, which have been passed down since the Holy Roman Empire period, are not strong, hundreds of years of intermarriage have made the royal family of these small kingdoms deeply rooted and have a huge network of relationships. Therefore, when Constantine went to Germany to study, he must have frequent contact with German nobles. For Queen Olga, It was a rare opportunity to find a good wife. Constantine had no objection to political marriage. After he became clear about the concept of marriage of the nobles, his fantasy of freedom of love disappeared. If Constantine staged a play against feudal ethics and love of freedom, the political consequences would be very serious. How serious? It may cause a world war. For example, the crown prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, because he married a commoner woman. Not only did the Austro-Hungarian emperor dislike him, but even the nobles of the Austro-Hungarian Empire did not agree with him. The aristocratic circles and social places of the Austro-Hungarian Empire strongly rejected the Grand Duchess Ferdinand, who was a commoner. She was often ignored in public, so that Vienna left a bad impression on the Grand Duchess. In order to make the Grand Duchess relieve her depressed mood, the Ferdinands went to Sarajevo to relax, but they were assassinated. Although this was a coincidence, the strong rejection of the aristocratic elite caused by the crown prince marrying a commoner woman made Constantine dare not touch this restricted area. I understand, mother. Although he was not very happy, Constantine could only bite the bullet and agree. First at this moment, Butler Capi walked in. Your Excellency, Colonel Brute of the Royal Guard, has come to the manor and is waiting for your reception. Having said that, he turned around and took Constantine to meet the colonel. Constantine promised to help Stanley's professional military personnel, who received orders from Constantine to travel across the ocean to Congo, Africa. Because the royal guards deal with the crown prince's personal affairs, the royal family is responsible for all expenses of this military operation. In the reception room, Your Excellency, Brute, who was sitting on the sofa, hurriedly stood up when Constantine walked in. Standing upright, Brute, the mission has been notified to you. The 500 members of the Royal Guard are going to Africa to maintain the trade order in Africa and combat slave traders. Do you have any questions? More important, Your Excellency, how long will this operation last? Brute asked. About a year or so, no longer than 2 years. Then, the Royal Guards must obey Mr. Stanley's command? What if Mr. Banning disagrees with Mr. Stanley? Follow Stanley's command? But the final opinion is up to Banning. Brute, are you from a commoner? Constantine stared at Brute, and suddenly said, yes. Brute was a little puzzled when he heard Constantine suddenly ask him about his personal affairs. Does the whole family live in Athens? The cost of Athens is very high, Constantine said. Athens is the capital of Greece and a seaport city with a dense population and developed commerce. As the head of the Royal Guards, Brute was a captain, and his salary was not low, with a monthly salary of 30 drymarks. If Brute lived alone, this kind of income would be enough for him to live a very nourishing life. But Brute's family has a large population, with 2 younger brothers and a younger sister. His father is at home all the year round due to his poor health and cannot work. He relies on his mother to help support the family. Brute also lived up to the expectations of his family and graduated from the Athens Military Academy with honors. Because he was smart and hard-working, he was favored by Constantine and personally promoted him to be the head of the guards. Most of Brute's salary needs to subsidize his family, so his money is always tight. Brute, this African operation, whether it is for me, Greece, or you, is of great significance. It can only succeed, not fail. Constantine regarded the resources of the Congo as the cornerstone of the rise of Greece, which was of great significance to the great ideals of the Greeks. Over the years, Constantine has devoted a lot of energy to the Congo. He hopes that the officers he values can help him and the Greeks, and make great contributions. If we succeed this time, Brute, we will all be successful. You will become a big man, and you will never worry about the difficulties of your family's life again. Constantine held Brute's shoulders with both hands, emotional, excited and flushed. Chapter 20, Experimental Results. Looking at the emotional Constantine in front of him, Brute was a little surprised. In the previous contact with Constantine, Constantine was gentle and polite, and he had never seen him so rude. Your Excellency, I will do my best. Brute was also very grateful to his benefactor Constantine in his heart. Brute, your future and destiny all depend on this mission. Promoted Brute, who had no senior military experience, to the position of the regiment commander. Constantine was under a lot of pressure. Originally, there were many people with deep connections and good military skills. He fell in love with the Royal Guard group positions. It's just that this position is rather special. The main responsibility of the Royal Guards is to protect the safety of the royal family. Military talent is not the most important selection condition, because the possibility of the Royal Guards going to the battlefield is very small. If Greece is really in such a critical situation that the Royal Guards need to go to the frontline battlefield, It doesn't matter whether there are guards or not. Loyalty to the royal family is the most important selection criterion for the position of the royal guard. Therefore, Constantine rejected other candidates and chose Brute, a person with relatively simple social relations. From Constantine's words, Brute clearly felt the importance of this mission. "Yes, Your Excellency, do you have any other orders?" Brute asked Constantine, who felt that he was a little rude, took a deep breath, adjusted his emotions, and continued to say to Brute, "You also know that I have been planning colonies in Africa. Because the country's strength is weak, we can't make a fool of yourself and arouse the vigilance of the foreign powers, so we can't send troops to Africa on a large scale," Constantine said. The royal guard of 500 men, spread out over the vast Congo River basin, to complete the plan. "I am afraid that it is still not enough. Therefore, Brute, if the time is right, you need to prepare some indigenous armies in Africa to strengthen the strength of the Congo." Constantine whispered to Brute, "The reason for this is that no matter how many indigenous troops there are, the nations will not care too much. After all, the indigenous people at this time are savages and ignorant in the consciousness of Europeans. This is not racial discrimination, it is simply ignoring it." This request of Constantine was beyond Brute's expectations. "Just let the natives appear in the army, whether it is an officer or a soldier, there will be complaints." Fortunately, the officer said that apart from the racial sentiment factor, the indigenous people joined in, after all, to strengthen the military power in their hands, and those soldiers had great objections after the natives joined the army. They were under the command of the officers. Doesn't it mean that they are the same as the African native soldiers as long as it's a European soldier? I'm afraid it will be full of backlash. Your Excellency, is this too radical? Constantine's instructions made Brute feel a little embarrassed. Didn't I say, the timing is right, it's not for you to be reckless, Constantine said. Besides that, you have to be careful about the powers of other countries, such as France and Portugal, and try not to provoke them if it's not necessary. The strength of the French is not easy to defend. The Portuguese have been operating in the Angolan colony for hundreds of years, and they are deeply ingrained. They are not something that the Greeks who have just arrived can provoke. Your will be implemented, Your Excellency. Seeing that Constantine had no other demands, Brute straightened up, saluted Constantine respectfully, and turned to leave the reception room. After dinner that day, Nina came to Constantine's room with a gloomy face. "What's the matter, Nina?" Constantine asked with concern. "Constantine, I'm going to study at the university," Nina said glumly. Hearing Nina's words, Constantine was stunned. The two of them were about to start their schooling journey, which also meant that they were about to separate. "Which school are you going to? What major are you studying?" Constantine asked curiously. "The University of Athens. As for what to study, I haven't decided yet." "Constantine, what major do you think I should choose, and what major do you think is more useful? Can you give me some advice?" Although Nina is smart, she still wants to seek the help of friends when she encounters a significant life decision. The University of Athens has a history of decades and is located in the Acropolis of Athens. The Acropolis is 156 meters above sea level and can be seen from anywhere in Athens. The top of the Acropolis is home to the most outstanding works of ancient Greek civilization, and the Acropolis is also famous for these museums. Among them, the most well-known ones are the Parthenon, also known as the Temple of Athena, the entrance to the Acropolis, and so on. Although the University of Athens is not bad, there is a problem that most of her majors are liberal arts, such as politics, law, philosophy, theology, business, and so on. Science and engineering majors are rare, and not many people are interested in this era. Those who can afford to go to college are wealthy families with good money. Most of the students from such families have studied liberal arts. Of course, this may have something to do with the current state of Greece. Greek commerce is developed, but Greek industry, for various reasons, is still in a primitive state. After students study science and engineering, they have little use. In fact, at the end of the 19th century, schools with profound scientific and technological attainments, such as UU reading www.uucanchu.com, can be counted on one hand in Europe, and each of them is famous. However, when I think of the plan in Africa, I think I will definitely need business talents in the future. Nina, if you don't have any special hobbies, then go to the law school of the University of Athens to study. Constantine said the law school's courses mainly include law, politics, economics, and other subjects. If Nina goes to study these courses, she will definitely find a useful place in the future. 2 days later, Constantine, who was in the palace waiting for the news of the experiment, met Philip, the director of the Athens City Hospital, who hurried to the Tatoi Palace. "Your Excellency, what exactly is the medicine you gave? You didn't pretend to be cinchona bark, did you?" Philip, who trotted all the way from the gate to the reception room, was panting with sweat on his forehead since Constantine sent the medicine 3 days ago. Philip first filtered the mixture, then heated and evaporated the alcohol solution, and obtained some white and green crystals. The skeptical Philip experiment team, for the sake of safety, first used 4 white mice to verify the toxicity of the drug. It was found that there was no obvious abnormality in the 4 mice after eating the drug mixed in the food. Only then did Philip's team dare to conduct human-controlled trials of the 8 patients with mild malaria who were compared to each other. The experimental team gave 2 of them quinine, 2 of the experimental drug, and 4 of them just some placebos made of flour. No effect, only for comparison. What was the result of the experiment? This was the question that Constantine cared about. "There is no doubt that this drug has an effect on malaria," Philip said excitedly. Chapter 21, Anxious Philip. The amount of the test drug given by Constantine was not much, and after the preliminary test confirmed, there was not much left among the 8 experimental cases. What surprised Philip's experimental team was that the speed of malaria disease disappearance in 2 patients taking artemisinin was 2 hours faster than that in 2 control patients taking quinine. Seeing that the experimental drug was indeed effective against malaria, Philip's team originally planned to follow the planned steps to continue the next more detailed drug verification test. Drug experimentation is a very serious and cautious process. It is impossible to rashly determine that an experimental drug is indeed a special drug for malaria just because an experiment is successful. It's just that an accident happened at this time. One of the experimental team, a young doctor named Teres, served as one of Philip's assistants in the experiment. His sister Kira was admitted to the Athens City Hospital after suffering from malaria. 15-year-old girl Kayla has severe symptoms of malaria, sometimes fever, profuse sweating and flushing. Occasionally it gets cold. In April, the weather is covered with 3 or 4 pairs of quilts, but it is still cold. After taking the expensive German-made quinine, the symptoms are still not relieved, but the price of quinine is high. This is a real imported drug, and the price is very expensive, and a single dose costs hundreds of delamarks. 1 pound is about 25 dramarks. At the end of the 19th century, about 70% of the raw material of quinine circulating in the market was cinchona bark, which came from the Netherlands-controlled Java Island, Peru and other Andes mountains. The origin of the cinchona tree, countries, relying on wild golden pheasants. Nashu, occupying the remaining market. Although the Dutch have a monopoly on cinchona bark, the embarrassing thing is that their chemical technology is powerless to extract quinine from cinchona bark. Because the technology of extracting quinine was monopolized by the Germans, the Dutch traveled thousands of miles from the island of Java, spanning half the world. The collected cinchona bark must be sent to a chemical factory in Germany for processing to extract quinine. This double monopoly keeps the price of quinine high. By 1890, the chemical industry of extracting quinine had developed into a huge industry in Germany with an annual output value of 200 million marks. For example, Germany's famous Bayer, BASF and other companies engaged in the chemical industry are all engaged in this industry moisturized by huge profits. By 1900, the Germans could be said to be alone in their quest for defeat in chemical technology, leading no other country. The Dutch cinchona bark contributed to this. In the ward, Teres saw her usually lively and active sister. Her face was ravaged by malaria. In just a few days, her originally white and red face became thin and dark yellow, and her heart was greatly touched. To make matters worse, after my sister took quinine, the side effects of vomiting and diarrhea were extremely serious. Under the double torture of malaria and side effects, Kayla's body is getting weaker and weaker. Even if the family gritted their teeth, they could still raise the money to buy another dose of quinine, but Teres still felt that the possibility of cure was not high. Teres, who participated in the drug trial, immediately thought of the new anti-malarial drug being tested. Although it is only a preliminary experiment, taking it rashly is very likely to cause an accident. But my sister, Kayla, can't afford it anymore. She has malaria, sequelae of anemia and splenomegaly. This means that her life is in danger. Teres found Philip privately and begged Philip with tears to let his sister Kayla take the artemisinin that was receiving the experimental drug. His colleague, Teres, was in grief and infected Philip. Out of sympathy, seeing that Kayla's condition could not be delayed, he agreed to Teres' request. After Kayla took the dose that Philip thought was appropriate, the symptoms of chills and fever were quickly relieved, and there was no recurrence the next day. After taking it for 3 consecutive days, The alternation of cold and heat has disappeared, Caleb can sleep peacefully every night, and the malaria is obviously cured after seeing the performance of artemisinin. Philip, who has been in the doctor's industry for many years, is keenly aware that a new special medicine for malaria has appeared. Philip came in a hurry. Just wanting to know the specific situation of this drug, just look at the Peruvian government strictly prohibits anyone from selling cinchona seeds or saplings to foreigners, and the Dutch have spent 30 years trying to grow them on the island of Java. To see how lucrative this is a lucrative industry, Your Excellency, when will this drug be available in the market? Philip asked eagerly the source of the drug. He wisely did not ask. Even if he asked, Constantine could not have said it. Circulation. Constantine was startled by Philip's question. To be honest, he has no plans to sell artemisinin in the near future. As soon as word spread that Constantine had mastered a new malaria drug, people with deep backgrounds and well-informed people would soon follow, either coercion or inducement. The status of a Greek crown prince is simply not enough to rely on www.uxiaspit.com. Given the current predicament of Greece, they can always find reasons that Constantine could not refuse from the very beginning. Constantine only intended to use artemisinin as a supply material for the royal guards that were about to go to the Congo River Basin, in order to reduce the non-combat attrition of African operations. Malaria, an infection that can be spread by mosquitoes, is a big threat in the hot climate of southern Africa. Philip, for various reasons, it is unlikely that this drug will be available in the near future. Constantine said the reason why Philip was in a hurry to ask clearly was not because he wanted to get a piece of the pie. Instead, as a doctor with a lofty sense of mission, he deeply hates malaria, a widespread infectious disease. Quinine, a popular malaria drug on the market, is expensive, and many poor patients cannot afford it. If another malaria drug appeared to compete with quinine, the cost of treating malaria patients would be greatly reduced. Philip, who has been working in the hospital for many years, felt desolate when he thought of the tragic situation of those patients who could not afford to buy quinine and could only endure the torture of alternating cold and heat, waiting to die for the doctor who treats and saves people. In the face of such a tragic situation in the world, he bears a strong condemnation in his heart. There are often doctors who can't stand this heart-wrenching torment and secretly use quinine to poor patients because the price of quinine is so high. Patients cannot afford the medicine. Although occasionally some rich people or churches donate money to charity, it is not enough to cover the loss, and in the end, only the hospital can bear it. As the director of the hospital, Philip had already dealt with several such incidents and could only reluctantly fire these doctors or nurses. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, Complex Relationship. Your Excellency, your new medicine will save countless poor lords' lambs in the morning, said Philip. Philip, I will put the new drug on the market as soon as possible. By the way, you are here today, do you have anything else? Constantine said. Seeing that Constantine changed the subject, Philip no longer bothered. Your Excellency, the matter you promised to provide the corpses of the prisoners in the hospital. Philip was worried that Constantine had forgotten. I'll ask Butler Caput to take you to the warden of the Athens prison, and he'll help you get it done, Constantine said. Constantine summoned a group of servants, went to the beach where the Artemisia was found in the manor, and returned with 2 carriages. Then, according to the previous method, a batch of artemisinin was made and sent to the residence of the Wang family guards on the morning of April 28. Constantine, who had just woken up, met Georgi, who hurried to his study. Constantine, did you know that His Royal Highness Prince William of Germany is coming to Corfu, Greece for a holiday, said King Georgi. Which? Your Highness William. Constantine didn't react for a while. Prince of Germany, His Royal Highness Wilhelm. George repeated. Prince Wilhelm. That was the future Emperor Wilhelm I of Germany. What do you need me to do? Constantine was still very conscious. You are about the same age, and I want you to receive him and accompany him on a tour of Corfu, said George. The age is similar. Where's it similar? William was born in 1858, nearly 10 years older than Constantine, and Constantine had a bad heart. Okay, I'll go. Constantine knew that it was indeed the most appropriate thing to do it by himself. Go to Corfu, maybe you will meet an elder, Georgi said in a mysterious tone. The island of Corfu is located in the Adriatic Sea on the western side of Greece, Between Italy and Greece, it was once ruled by the Republic of Venice in Italy for a period of time. Therefore, there are many Italian-style buildings on the island. The scenery is beautiful, and it is indeed a good place for vacation. As for the mysterious elder, Constantine didn't think much about it. He would know it when he saw it. Constantine sat in the royal carriage, parked at the port of Piraeus, where ships came and went, looking at the busy wharf in front of him, crowded with people. By connecting the dock and the freighter with wooden boards, the dockers unloaded the yellow sacks from the freighter, and then loaded new cargo onto the ship. The ship whistled and whistled away from the dock, and then the next ship docked, and the cycle went on and on. Speaking of which, the only thing worth mentioning in Greece is probably the shipping industry that extends in all directions. Since ancient Greece, the Greeks have been accustomed to maritime trade. When Athens was a city-state, it was a famous Mediterranean commercial port city. In Greece in the 21st century, the three pillars of foreign exchange income are tourism, remittances and shipping. Greece is the world's largest shipping country, and the ship tonnage under the name of Greek shipowners ranks first in the world. The reason for this is closely related to the national conditions of Greece. The whole of Greece is a peninsula, which is inserted into the Mediterranean Sea from the Balkans. The coastline is long and winding, and the coast is full of deep water and good harbors. Because the land in Greece is barren and the industry is not developed, many Greeks have always relied on seaboats as sailors for a living. On the left side of Greece, facing Anatolia across the Aegean Sea, and guarding the Bosphorus Strait, Greece has thus become an important intermediate node between the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea. On the right side of Greece, across the Adriatic Sea and adjacent to Italy, Greece became an important node from the Mediterranean Sea to the Austro-Hungarian Empire after the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869. Greece, which is located in the eastern Mediterranean, has increased its strategic importance. Every year through the Suez Strait, a large number of ships travel between the Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Atlantic Ocean. This route is in the south of Greece. Under the nose, it can be said that although the national strength of Greece is not good, its geographical location is extremely important. It can be said that the geographical location of Greece gives Greece an unquestionable influence on the three strategic shipping routes. This is the unique advantage of the Greek maritime industry, which makes it very convenient for Greek ships to go to all ports in the world. Such geographical location and national conditions require Greece not only to develop an army, but also to have an influential navy to protect the interests of maritime transport. Thinking of this, I couldn't help shaking my head and smiling bitterly. Compared with a gold-swallowing beast at sea, it is more affordable for the army to be able to fight a war with a single gun, a few bullets, and a month of training. This is more realistic. Sitting in the carriage, Constantine looked at the busy port through the window, thinking about the situation in Greece at this time. A beautiful cruise ship, all painted in white paint, docked, with a German Black Eagle flag hanging on the mast, flying high under the blowing of hayfang. One of the knights on guard came to the carriage and respectfully said to Constantine, "Your Excellency, the cruise ship you are waiting for has docked." Constantine, who was interrupted in his imagination, woke up like a dream. "Wow, I see." He waved his hand. Constantine, who got off the carriage, looked up at the side of the white cruise ship, and saw a majestic man in a black suit lying on the side of the ship boredly looking at the scenery of Piraeus port. It is Prince William of Germany. Constantine, who boarded the cruise, looked at the future German helm in front of him. According to the aesthetics of Westerners, William has a handsome appearance and extraordinary martial arts, and the mustache accumulated on his upper lip makes him more masculine. "William, it's nice to meet you," Constantine greeted, trying to avoid his gaze on William's left hand. William's left hand was injured at birth, so it was deformed. William always leaned to the side subconsciously to avoid the gaze of others. "Me too, Constantine," William agreed. "I am the host for a holiday in Greece," Constantine joked. "That's to be entertained." While the two were chatting, the ship had already left the port and headed for Corfu Island in Adriaco. By the end of the 19th century, the royal families in Europe were almost all related, such as Constantine himself and the prince in front of him. Constantine's grandfather, King Christian IX of Denmark, is known as the European father-in-law. He had 3 daughters, namely the 3 aunts of Constantine. One was married to the son of Queen Victoria, King Edward VI, the great emperor of India. The other was married to Alexander III, the absolute monarch of Russia, and the third was married to the Ernst August II, King of Hanover, annexed by Prussia. That is to say, before the First World War, the 3 major monarchies, the Emperor of England, Germany and Russia, and Constantine were cousins. Constantine had 2 aunts who were queens and 2 uncles who were emperors, and William's mother was Queen Victoria's eldest princess from this level of relationship. The 2 are cousins of the same generation. This is only considering the relationship line of Constantine's grandfather. Chapter 23, Corfu Vacations. The next morning, just before dawn, Constantine's new valet, Captain Schmidt, announced that Corfu had arrived. When he boarded the ship yesterday, he saw Schmidt carrying 2 large suitcases, which caught Constantine by surprise. Schmidt heard the words of Georgi, "The trip to study in Germany starts now, and in the suitcases your luggage." The sudden attack of Georgi gave Constantine the illusion of being swept out of the house. Hearing Schmidt say that Corfu has arrived, Constantine, dressed neatly, came to the deck of the cruise ship, and saw the island covered in green, the seagulls chirping, and between the blue sea and the green land, it was yellow beach. Looking towards the island along the beach, I saw low buildings full of Corfu-style, white stone walls, red tiles, and the blue sea, bright and distinct colors, bringing a strong sense of visual color impact, which strongly attracts people's attention. The remnants of the night lingered in the mist, giving everything a pleasing beauty, a hazy layer of veil. Constantine opened his hands, stretched his waist, and took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling refreshed and clear. "What a beautiful view," said William behind him. While the 2 were watching the beautiful scenery, Schmidt informed them that a carriage was coming to visit, saying that a guest invited them to visit. Constantine, who was confused, looked at William, who was willing to go, so he had to go with him. "William, where are we going? Who invited us?" Constantine, who was sitting in the luxury carriage, asked William, who was praising the beautiful scenery outside the car window. "The place we're going is Achilles' Palace," William replied without looking back. Constantine suddenly realized that this was the elder that Georgi was talking about, the famous Princess Sissy, the queen of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The carriage carried Constantine and William along the country road, all the way, and came to a white palace shaded by greenery. "Welcome to Achilles' Palace," the Austrian palace queen standing in the courtyard, and Queen Elizabeth, Princess Sissy, in a gorgeous dress, warmly received the 2 guests. Constantine brushed his chest with his left hand, took off his hat with his right hand, and presented luggage to Her Majesty the Queen. Although she is 45 years old, this queen, who is famous for her beauty and known as the most beautiful queen in Europe, still has her style with thick and lustrous long hair, fair skin, and a tall figure of 1.7 meters. She looks like a beauty. Aphrodite, your beauty overshadows the flowers, Your Majesty. Queen Elizabeth, Constantine said respectfully, "But for any woman, you can always please her by complimenting her on her beauty, especially beautiful women." "Thank you, Constantine," Queen Elizabeth replied with a smile. Obviously she was very pleased with Constantine's compliments. At this moment, a young man walked out of the hall and came to greet William. Apparently the 2 knew each other. "Constantine, this is my son, Rudolph," Elizabeth introduced when she saw Constantine's doubts. "Rudolph, this is Constantine." The 2 saluted each other. "Rudolph, that is the crown prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire." Because it was still early, Queen Elizabeth was very interested, and a guest came to the door today. "Therefore, I personally introduced Achilles' Palace to William and Constantine, this beautiful palace that I personally participated in the design of. First, there is the Mews courtyard facing the sea. The courtyard faces the sea and is full of green trees. The corridor in the courtyard is supported by Greek-style pillars. In front of each pillar stands a beautiful Muse, who is graceful and calm. The reason why this palace is called the Palace of Achilles is because of the frescoes of Achilles that often appear in decorative paintings. The oil painting Achilles on the chariot, the white marble statue the dying Achilles, and the bronze statue victorious Achilles fully demonstrate the beauty of Achilles' strength and sturdiness. "Your Majesty, you have designed an extremely beautiful palace," William said in admiration. William also likes beautiful and gorgeous buildings. The famous queen, because she couldn't stand the strict Viennese court, could only use travel around the world to relieve her depressed mood. Queen Elizabeth advocates ancient Greek culture and comes to Corfu every year to learn Greek. I am very happy to see that William likes his palace. While the 3 of them were visiting the courtyard, a maid came to pass a message. "Your Majesty, the lunch is ready. Her Royal Highness asked me to invite guests." Elizabeth led the 2 to the dining room, and the 4 sat around a round table. The servants took turns serving the dishes. "William, Constantine, what do you think of the current liberal trend among the nobility?" Rudolph suddenly asked. This question is very abrupt, because according to the dining etiquette of European aristocrats, some light-hearted topics should be discussed, and politics, sex, and health should not be discussed at the dinner table. Constantine and William could only look at the hostess. www.com. Queen Elizabeth. The Queen shrugged, which meant the topic could continue. Rudolph and his mother, Queen Elizabeth, were both liberals in the aristocratic class before the 19th century. Among the conditions for marriage between the two parties, the most important thing was blood, the next important thing was property, the least important thing was appearance, and the least important thing was affection. This aristocratic tradition that violated human nature was challenged at the end of the 19th century. The 19th century was an era of rapid development of science and technology, social economy, culture and morality. After the baptism of the first and second industrial revolutions in Europe, the rapid increase in production capacity and the rapid development of the economy led to great changes in the social landscape. What followed was more and more intermarriage between nobles and concubines, and the decadent aristocratic concept that violated human nature became more and more unpopular. The mother and son in front of them are the victims of this concept. Although the love story between Princess Sissy and the Emperor in later generations is widely circulated, Princess Sissy is a tragic figure. Princess Sissy, who grew up in a relatively open-minded family, was at odds with a strict court life. Rudolph committed suicide for the freedom of love at the end of the 19th century. There was a trend of liberalism. Those millionaires in the United States, through their successful efforts in the New World, held large sums of wealth, but their social status was not high. In the eyes of European aristocrats, they were a group of uneducated people. The nouveau riche, full of contempt, has no place for such a person at a gathering of the nobles, so those rich people put the opportunity to improve their social status on the aristocracy. The most famous example is the mother of British Prime Minister Churchill, Jenny Jerome. Chapter 24, New Era. From the end of the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, more than 200 daughters of American upstarts married British aristocrats. All the way intermarriage between nobles like this was unimaginable in the previous era. Liberalism is a kind of specter that threatens peace in Europe. According to the idea of liberal democracy, the country needs a referendum to elect a government, which will cause confusion in the national consciousness. The people will be at a loss, the government's policies will be swaying, and it will change course at every turn. Continued, in the long run, liberalism will cause serious internal friction. William said. William's view is the mainstream view of the monarchy ruling the country, not entirely unreasonable. In France after the Franco-Prussian War, the monarchy was overthrown and a republic was established according to the views of liberal Democrats. Such an advanced state system is far stronger than an ignorant, decadent, autocratic monarchy, and promotes the development of the country. But it is an obvious fact that the fastest growing European country in the 19th century was not a liberal democracy, France, where the referendum voted, but Germany, which was an autocratic monarchy at the end of the 19th century. After the reunification of Germany, the economy was the best in Europe, and it was proud of other countries. On the other hand, in France, the democratic government is inefficient and the government changes frequently. This status quo makes the views of the Democrats questionable. The advanced system you advocate has been established. Why is the economic development not as good as that of Germany, an autocratic backward country? It can be seen from this that liberal democracy is the result, not the cause, of the development of productive forces. Constantine, what do you think? Rudolph asked. Although there is no expectation that Constantine, who is only 15 years old, can express any refreshing views, however, it is also one of the rules in aristocratic banquets not to neglect the guests at the table. There is no doubt that the times are developing rapidly. In the new era, all classes need to have new survival wisdom and find their new position in society, Constantine said. Although Constantine's liberal remarks are obscure, all of you here are not ordinary people, so you can naturally hear them. To be honest, Constantine had a different identity from the three, and it was a bit embarrassing to talk about freedom. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, at the end of the 19th century, were the representatives of the absolute monarchies in Europe. The emperors of the three countries held full power within each country. Bismarck, one of the main figures of German reunification and long-term German prime minister, concluded a three emperors alliance: Germany, Austria-Hungary, Tsarist Russia, in order to isolate France after the reunification of Germany, largely because the three countries were similar ideology. The situation in Greece is different. Since Trikoupis, the first Greek politician, forced Georgia to recognize the principle that the king wins the love and trust of a majority in the parliament. The parties come to form the government, and their leader is the new prime minister, not the king who appointed the prime minister as before. This is another extreme in Greek politics because of the majority principle. The opposition parties often unite against the ruling party, forcing the incumbent prime minister to step down. The prime minister's term of office is only a few tens of days, but the long term is only 1 year. It is unimaginable in Greece to be Germany's prime minister for decades like Germany's Bismarck. From this point of view, Greece can be said to be the most liberal and democratic country in Europe. Of course, they do innate resource disadvantages and geographical conditions make economic development slow. Political chaos, freedom and democracy cannot solve Greece's development problems. Constantine, I remember that Greece today, from the point of view of those liberals, is very democratic. The Greek people use votes to elect their parliamentarians, the parliamentarians participate in politics, and the prime minister organizes the government. I just don't understand why Greece's development is so bad. As far as I know, the Greek government often borrows foreign debts to make up for the lack of fiscal revenue. Is borrowing foreign debts the wisdom of Greece's survival? William retorted. William's view of the current situation in Greece to refute Constantine's point of view is somewhat like a son's spear attacking a son's shield. What he said made sense, but the embarrassed Constantine was powerless to refute it. Why was Constantine in Greece, as the crown prince of Greece, basically never caring about politics and just watching from the sidelines? First, Constantine was too young to be convincing. Second, it was not that Constantine did not try. Of course, Constantine knew about the development of the country. He should promote industry and commerce, carry out compulsory education, cultivate talents, enrich the country and strengthen the army, develop armaments, defeat powerful enemies, dominate Europe, expand territory, and reach the pinnacle of the country. But the reality of Greece, it does not allow it. Without coal and iron, it is possible to develop a ghost industry and commerce. Without energy, without industrial raw materials, how to develop any industry? The essence of industrialization is to use energy and machines to replace part of manpower, improve production efficiency, and enhance the ability of human beings to obtain materials to support themselves. Of course, coal and iron can be imported, but in the 19th century, industrial raw materials and energy such as coal and iron with huge demand had to be imported. Steel is worth it. Every part of industrialization requires money. Where does the money come from? Greece has to import all its food. I want money but no money, no one, and no food. Therefore, after asking George with great interest about the economic situation of Greece, Constantine was thrown a pot of cold water. Constantine knew in his heart that the political, economic and military issues of Greece were basically unsolvable problems without external forces. It is difficult for a clever woman to cook without rice. You reading www.uucan'tchoo.com. Comparing Germany and France is not convincing at all. In fact, the concept of liberal democracy really took root in the hearts of the people, and that was after World War II. The wealthy and resourceful Americans have shown the world that democratic politics can enrich the country and strengthen the army. But just like a large number of countries that have learned from Soviet Russia's planned economy, how many have developed? How many of those who learned from the United States to engage in democratic politics have developed? English, French and German. Stop being funny. When people became a world power, there was nothing like the United States, without the unique advantages of the strong. It is useless to learn some fur. William, I think Constantine is right, but you are also right, Rudolph and Mud. The times are changing rapidly, no matter whether it is politics or ideas, nothing is static. Only those who can adapt to the new era more quickly can stand out. Rudolph continued, respect. For the change, Queen Elizabeth raised the goblet filled with blood-red wine in her hands, respect. For the change, everyone should be in harmony with the Tao and raise their glasses together after talking about serious topics. Elizabeth said, William, how is this Achilles' palace? I like this palace very much. The statues of characters in ancient Greek legends, the courtyard overlooking the sea. Standing in such a courtyard, the surrounding scenery is unobstructed. If only I could have such a courtyard. It is quiet and quiet. What a great place to take a vacation, William exclaimed. Although Germany also has many scenic tourist attractions, the Mediterranean Sea is truly unique with its beautiful sunshine, blue waters, and yellow beaches. Chapter 25, The Importance of Railways. In the next 2 days, Elizabeth and William chatted very speculatively because of their common hobby in architecture, so much so that before the two left Corfu, Queen Elizabeth officially announced that she had made her will and that William would inherit this exquisite Achilles' palace after her death, on the grounds that the treasure should be left to those who appreciate it. Its unique charm. Hearing this, Constantine and Rudolph were very surprised, because the Queen came to this beautiful holy place on the Adriatic Sea every summer to spend the summer for her. It was a way of escaping the tedious court life of Vienna, which was strict and red-tape. The two did not expect Queen Elizabeth to hand it over to William to inherit. William and Constantine, who left by cruise ship, went north along the Adriatic Sea, past the Austro-Hungarian Empire, landed in the Austro-Hungarian Empire from Trieste, an important seaport city, and took the train to Germany. Constantine's journey to study in Germany began after following William to Berlin. He visited Crown Prince Frederick, later German Emperor Frederick III, and his mother Crown Princess Victoria, the eldest daughter of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who lived in Sanssouci Palace. He happened to meet William's youngest sister, Princess Sophie, who was about the same age as Constantine for nearly a year after that. Constantine studied political science at the University of Heidelberg with his mentor, Dr. Reuters. It was not until October 1883 that Schmidt received a telegram from Banning. The Lion's territory had been secured, the invaders had been repelled, and a new journey could begin. This is a coded telegram, which clearly means the construction of the stronghold in the Congo River basin has been completed, and other adventurers who coveted this place have been expelled, and other preparations can be made. Constantine, who received the telegram, immediately took the train and took Schmidt to Hamburg. On the way, the two of them had a very deep understanding of the fast-growing railways in Germany and the railway lines extending in all directions. Sitting on the train from Heidelberg to Hamburg, Schmidt envied, "It's really convenient. If only Greece could have a large number of railways, then we will definitely be able to defeat the Turks." Schmidt obviously noticed the role of railways in warfare, but as a soldier, he did not know enough about the economic value of railways for today's #1 power in continental Europe. The speed of its development is the envy of Constantine, and railways play an important role in the modernization of a country. Before the railway, there was only one kind of large-scale means of transportation for human beings in order to use ships to transport materials. In history, various countries were forced to spend huge human and material resources to build numerous canals, such as the Beijing-Hangzhou Grand Canal in China, the Erie Canal in the United States, the Suez Canal in France, and the Kiel Canal in Germany. Even in the 21st century, ship transportation is still the cheapest way of transportation, and nothing is the cheapest. This situation has led to the fact that before the emergence of railways, the world's most powerful countries were islands or coastal countries, and people called such countries as maritime countries. Countries such as Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and France, which have successively emerged as world powers, all have one thing in common: relying on the convenience of shipping. They are all maritime countries. The long coastline provides enough seaports to boost the development of commerce. Their rise is dependent on the advantages of a naval power, a commercial power, and a shipping power. Until the advent of railways, it became possible for land countries to transport goods on a large scale and cheaply. Speaking of which, Germany's national destiny is a powerful proof of this. The economic unification of Germany is far ahead of the political unification. The establishment of the German customs union has laid the foundation for the unification of Germany in the 20th century. Germany, which was a country where the wind was blowing in all directions and whose ability to fight astonished the world, had maintained a fragmented political structure for a long time until the beginning of the 19th century. The desire for a unified market in the economic development of the German region became more and more intense. The various states levied tariffs on each other, which seriously hindered the development of German commerce. For example, the Rhine River, as an important commercial waterway, has important commercial value, but before the establishment of the German customs union, various states set up tax cards in order to increase taxes. After a ship of goods is transported through the Rhine, the accumulated taxes and fees are higher than the value of the goods themselves. This kind of bad situation makes the Rhine River, a natural trade route of great commercial value, greatly reduced. After the establishment of the customs union, driven by economic interests, various states began to build railways. In 1835, Germany only had a 6-kilometer railway. After the establishment of the customs union, driven by economic interests, various states began to build railways. Before the Franco-Prussian War, in 1870, Germany, with an area of only a few 100,000 square kilometers, had a railway mileage of 19,575 kilometers. The railway has developed to such a point that although each state is still independent, the commercial links established through the railway have made the whole of Germany closely linked. By 1871, before the outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War, in just 1 week, Prussia and various states had assembled troops through various railway stations, and delivered 500,000 troops, as well as supporting equipment and materials to the assembly areas on the front line. On the French side, Napoleon III only gathered 200,000 troops and rushed to the front. As a result, The war lasted only a few months, and Napoleon III led hundreds of thousands of French troops to surrender. www.wuxiaspit.com. This result surprised all countries. The military value of railways has been valued by military strategists from all over the world since then. If you really want to say what is the most direct factor in the rise of Germany, the railways are the most important contributors. Thinking of this, Schmidt patted his shoulder and said, "Sooner or later, Greece will also build a large-scale railway." The two got off the train in Hamburg, and after leaving the train station, they reunited with Banning, who is returning from Africa. Banning is the chairman of the Congolese Council and has been in Africa until now, cooperating in Stanley's adventures in place of Constantine. Banning was an important advisor to Constantine, and he has been giving advice to Constantine since the start of the African plan. "Welcome back to Europe, Banning," Constantine said to the tanned Banning, then gave him a hug. "Thank you, Your Excellency." Afterwards, the three found a cafe on the street. "Your Excellency, our business base in Africa has been completed," Banning said excitedly. "What about the specifics? How many commercial strongholds are there, and what about the entrustment of the ruling treaty?" Constantine asked eagerly when he heard these words. "The Congolese Commission has established about 30 commercial bases and about 400 entrustment treaties in Africa," Banning replied. "Your Excellency, I came back this time just to discuss with you, what should we do next?" Banning asked whether it is a power of attorney or a business base. "If it is not recognized by the European powers, it will be meaningless." How to get the recognition of European powers? The most difficult part of this African plan is the Congolese Commission's suzerainty status over the Congo River Basin. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.